Hello friends, welcome to CivilsWrite YouTube channel. My name is Avinash Agarwal and in this video I'll be discussing with you all the 20 questions ka approach as well as model answer for 2024 UPSC Civil Services Mains General Studies Paper 1. We will also be providing an opportunity to you to undertake answer writing practice. पहले मैं आपको ये समझा देता हूँ कि आपको ये वीडियो क्यों देखना चाहिए। अगर आप सपोज कर लीजिए कि मेंस लिखने वाले हैं 25, 26, 27 में, आप अच्छे स्टूडेंट हैं, आपको मालूम है कि प्रीलिम्स आपका क्लियर होना है, सीनियर स्टूडेंट है, आपकी तैयारी हो चुकी है, तो आपको ये वीडियो इसलिए देखना चाहिए बिकॉज दिस विल गिव यू अ डीप अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ द नेचर ऑफ क्वेश्चंस दैट हैव बीन आस्क्ड एंड कंटेंट रीयूजेबल होता ही होता है, राइट? आपको कहीं ना कोई तरीके से ये कंटेंट काम आ जाता है आने वाले एग्जाम्स के अंदर। अगर आप प्रीलिम्स की तैयारी कर रहे हैं फॉर 25, 26, 27 कोई भी ईयर के अंदर, तो जो इस पेपर के टॉपिक्स हैं, वैदिक एज, पल्लवा आर्किटेक्चर, पल्लवा लिटरेचर, क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट, क्लाउडबर्स्ट, इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन, चोलास, सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर, सरफेस सी टेम्परेचर, ट्विस्टर्स, ऑरोरास, तो ये बहुत ही अच्छे टॉपिक्स है। आप इन टॉपिक्स को प्रीलिम्स एग्जामिनेशन के अंदर कभी भी एनकाउंटर कर सकते हैं, कोई भी समय पे आपको इसके ऊपर क्वेश्चन पूछा जा सकता है। सपोज कर लीजिए कि आप यूपीएससी के साथ साथ पीसीएस का भी एग्जाम दे रहे हैं या सिर्फ पीसीएस का एग्जाम दे रहे हैं, चाहे कोई भी पीसीएस हो, यूपी पीसीएस हो, बिहार पीसीएस हो, हिमाचल पीसीएस हो, कोई भी पीसीएस हो, तो कई बार आप देखते हैं कि जो टॉपिक्स हैं दे आर लिफ्टेड डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम सिविल सर्विसेज एग्जामिनेशन एंड देर इज एन इंक्रीजिंग कन्वर्जेंस बिटवीन द टॉपिक्स ऑफ सिविल सर्विसेज एग्जामिनेशन एज वेल एज पीसीएस। सो लुकिंग एट दिस वीडियो, गोइंग थ्रू दिस डॉक्यूमेंट विल बी वेरी हेल्पफुल फॉर यू। अगर आप बिगनर हैं तो जो टॉपिक्स हम कवर करने लग रहे हैं, जो अप्रोच हम आपके साथ डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, सो आई एम नॉट जस्ट डिस्कसिंग एनी मॉडल आंसर और वेरी शॉर्ट आंसर, आई एम डिस्कसिंग इन डेप्थ द टॉपिक, कंप्लीट टॉपिक. So first of all you will get a complete understanding of the topic and second of all you will be able to align your preparation with the actual exam requirement. ये पहला वीडियो है इस प्रकार का जो हम लोग ने आपके लिए शूट करा है, ऐसे बहुत सारे वीडियोस मैं आपके लिए शूट करने वाला हूँ। एंड अल्टीमेटली आप जानते हैं दोस्तों कि प्रैक्टिस मेक्स अ मैन परफेक्ट और एनीबडी परफेक्ट। अगर आप आंसर राइटर है तो ही आपका एग्जाम क्लियर करने का इवेंचुअली कोई चांस बनने वाला है, अगर आप प्रैक्टिस कर रहे हैं तो ही चांस बनने वाला है। वी आर ऑफरिंग असिस्टेड आंसर राइटिंग, you can go through this video, watch it completely, then do answer writing. You can do answer writing and then watch this video, completely up to you. We are offering you experienced, very humane, very humble, cost effective mentorship. We believe that everybody can become excellent answer writers provided you are willing to practice, provided you are willing to put in the hard yards. It's as simple as that. CivilsWrite is India's first dedicated channel for answer writing. Now we need your support, you need our support. It's an extremely cost effective venture. So what we are offering over here is that if you just want the document and nothing else, this is the price. If you want the document and do answer writing practice, then this is the price. As simple as that, nothing more than that. For first 15 days this is the discounted price. After 15 days the prices will increase. जो भी हम वीडियोस बनाएंगे हमारे चैनल के ऊपर इसी प्रकार के प्राइसिंग को हम फॉलो करेंगे। वी वांट टू डेमोक्रेटाइज आंसर राइटिंग प्रैक्टिस, वी वांट टू मेक इट वेरी accessible to each one of you. Let us start with our discussion. All the 20 questions I will be discussing. नियरली 3 घंटे 3.5 घंटे मुझे लग सकते हैं, थोड़ा कम ज़्यादा भी लग सकता है। सो आपको पूरा का पूरा अंडरस्टैंडिंग मैं इस वीडियो के अंदर देने वाला हूँ, राइट? फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज अंडरलाइन द चेंजेस इन द फील्ड ऑफ सोसाइटी एंड इकोनॉमी फ्रॉम द ऋग वैदिक टू द लेटर वैदिक पीरियड. तो दिस क्वेश्चन इज बेसिकली आई वुड से एन ईजी क्वेश्चन इन द एग्जामिनेशन. वाई? बिकॉज इफ यू आर अ सीरियस कैंडिडेट देन आपने वैदिक लिटरेचर के बारे में या वैदिक पीरियड के बारे में पढ़ा होगा हिस्ट्री के अंदर. ऐसा हो नहीं सकता है कि आपने वैदिक पीरियड के बारे में, अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड एंड लेटर वैदिक पीरियड के बारे में पढ़ा ना हो. एंड जब आपने इसके बारे में पढ़ा होगा तो आपने 100% अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड के सोसाइटी एज वेल एज इकोनॉमी एंड लेटर वैदिक पीरियड के इकोनॉमी एज वेल एज सोसाइटी के बारे में आपने ज़रूर पढ़ा होगा. तो आपको अपने पढ़े हुए नॉलेज को यूज़ करके इस सीधे साधे क्वेश्चन को आंसर करना था, राइट? आंसर आपको जो देना था उसका मैं अभी आपको पूरा डिटेल थियोरेटिकल डिस्कशन आई एम गोइंग टू प्रोवाइड टू यू, राइट? सो वैदिक पीरियड इज स्पैनिंग फ्रॉम 1500 BCE टू अराउंड 600 BCE. इट कैन बी ब्रोकन डाउन इनटू ऋग वैदिक पीरियड एंड लेटर वैदिक पीरियड, ठीक है? अब जो ऋग वैदिक सोसाइटी है, ठीक है, ऋग वैदिक सोसाइटी और द अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड, ठीक है, so that was a period when the major occupation was that of being a pastoralist. जो आपका लाइफस्टाइल था that was a semi nomadic lifestyle. and later Vedic period आते आते आप देखेंगे कि sedentary agriculture हमने प्रैक्टिस कर लिया because we have mastered the art of agriculture, जो कि हमें पहले उतना ज्यादा नहीं आता था अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड में भी, लेकिन उतना अच्छे से नहीं आता था, राइट? आप देखेंगे कि फ्रॉम द अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड टू द लेटर वैदिक पीरियड सोशल हायरार्कीज जो है वो काफ़ी रिजिड हो जाएंगे। आप देखेंगे कि काफ़ी सारे कॉम्प्लेक्स पॉलिटिकल एंड सोशल इंस्टीट्यूशंस क्रिएट हो जाएंगे फ्रॉम अर्ली टू लेटर वैदिक पीरियड। सो व्हाट वर द मेजर चेंजेस इन सोसाइटी? सबसे पहला चेंज आप बात करेंगे जो है उसकी सोशल स्ट्रैटिफिकेशन की, कि इन द ऋग वैदिक पीरियड सोसाइटी फिर भी इगैलिटेरियन थी। स्ट्रैटिफिकेशन था बट दैट वाज मिनिमल, it was not very rigid, right? And you could see that your position across the societal hierarchy was fluid, yani ki you can rise up if you are meritorious, if you are, you know, having the talent, willing to work hard, etc., and vice versa, ठीक है। बट लेटर वैदिक पीरियड आते आते आप देखेंगे कि जो हमारा वर्णा सिस्टम है इट बिकेम रिजिड, इट बिकेम हायरार्किकल, कि जो आपकी स्टेटस एट द टाइम ऑफ बर्थ, उस स्टेटस को चेंज करना बिकेम वेरी वेरी डिफिकल्ट। जो ब्राह्मणास थे, क्षत्रियास थे, वैश्यास थे, उनके जो पावर्स थे, उनके जो प्रिविलेजेस थे, वो काफ़ी सॉलिडिफाई हो गए। एंड हमने एक फोर्थ सो कॉल्ड कास्ट क्रिएट कर दी, दैट इज शूद्रास, राइट। एंड शूद्रास वर नॉट एग्जैक्टली ट्रीटेड एज अनटचेबल्स, बट इनकी सिचुएशन को काफ़ी खराब माना जा सकता है, इन द सेंस कि जो भी सारा मेहनत मजदूरी का काम था वो शूद्रास से जोर जबरदस्ती के माध्यम से करवाया जा सकता था, आप इस प्रकार से कह सकते हैं, राइट। पुरुषा शुक्ता हाइम जो है, पुरुषा शुक्ता हाइम ऋग्वेदा से, इट मेंशंस अबाउट 4 वर्नास, कि ये जो 4 वर्नास है दे आर बेसिकली द बॉडी पार्ट्स ऑफ द कॉस्मिक बीइंग पुरुषा, राइट। तो ये हमने हमारी किताबों के अंदर लिटरेचर के तरह आपने ये सब जरूर पढ़ा होगा कि जो हेड है दैट रिप्रेजेंट्स द ब्राह्मणास, जो आर्म्स है दैट रिप्रेजेंट्स द क्षत्रियास, जो थाइज या पैर है दैट रिप्रेजेंट्स द वैश्यास, एंड जो फीट है दैट रिप्रेजेंट्स द शूद्रास, ठीक है। तो इस प्रकार का पुरुषा शुक्ता के अंदर आपको देखने को मिलता है। जो पोजीशन ऑफ विमेन है, तो ऋग वैदिक पीरियड के दौरान रिलेटिवली बेटर स्टेटस है। आप एग्जांपल दे सकते हो गर्गी का, मैत्रेयी का, रिस्पेक्टेड स्कॉलर्स थे वो दौरान पे। विमेन के एजुकेशन, डिसीजन मेकिंग, पार्टिसिपेशन के अंदर कोई रोक टोक नहीं थी बहुत ज्यादा। बट लेटर वैदिक पीरियड आते आते यू विल सी दैट चाइल्ड मैरिजेस, limitations on women's role, forcing or restricting women to perform only domestic chores, these kinds of problems will start emerging as you enter into the later Vedic period. In the later Vedic texts such as Manusmriti, you will see that there is a decline in women's autonomy, and you will see the strong emergence of patriarchal control which continues till date in India. So this is about position of women. So we are discussing the changes in the social structure, that is what we are discussing, changes in the society. So we have discussed social stratification, we have discussed position of women. Now coming to family structure and patriarchy. So ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड के दौरान फैमिलीज और पैट्रीनिलियल इन द सेंस दैट कि हम हमारे फादर्स के लाइंस से जो है अपने आप को आइडेंटिफाई करते थे, दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ द टर्म पैट्रीलिनियल, राइट। सो मोस्ट ऑफ द इंडिया के अंदर आज भी आप देखेंगे तो पैट्रीलिनियल फैमिलियल डिसेंट इज समथिंग दैट इज फॉलोड। देर आर सम पार्ट्स इन इंडिया जहां पर मैट्रीलिनियलिटी भी फॉलो करा जा सकता है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल देर आर सम कम्युनिटीज इन केरला जहां पर आपको मैट्रीलिनियलिटी भी देखने को मिलती है। During the Rig Vedic period, we have nuclear families. We don't have the concept of joint family. Joint family का concept will start emerging in later Vedic period. You will see that Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc. They are glorifying the joint family system because patriarchy has intensified. Right, property आ चुकी है, agriculture land becomes an important property, so land has to remain within the family. So family is remaining a joint family, and you will see an increase in the male dominance. So अगर आपको सोसाइटल कंपैरिजन देना है बिटवीन ऋग वैदिक पीरियड एंड लेटर वैदिक पीरियड, तो एटलीस्ट इतना कंपैरिजन आप आसानी से दे सकते हैं। जब आप अपना खुद का आंसर लिखकर हमें भेजेंगे, सो यू कैन डू फर्दर वैल्यू एडिशन इफ यू वांट, दैट विल बी आल्सो वेरी गुड ऑन योर पार्ट, ठीक है। लेकिन इतना आंसर अगर आपने लिख दिया तो उतना अच्छा होगा। चेंजेस इन इकोनॉमी की बात करें, सो आपको पहला चीज जो लिखना है वो ये है कि देयर इज अ शिफ्ट फ्रॉम पेस्टोरलिज्म टू एग्रीकल्चर, कि ऋग वैदिक पीरियड के दौरान the occupation is mainly cattle based occupation. Primary wealth is also in the form of cows, ठीक है। और जो ट्रेड और अर्बनाइजेशन है वो उतना ज्यादा मेच्योर नहीं हुआ है। बट बाय द टाइम लेटर वैदिक पीरियड कम्स, आपको ये मेंशन जरूर करना है अपने आंसर्स के अंदर कि थैंक्स टू द यूजेज ऑफ आयरन टूल्स सच एज प्लाउज, सिकल्स, हम फॉरेस्टेड एरिया को क्लियर कर सकते हैं, हम एग्रीकल्चर लार्ज स्केल फार्मिंग पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हैं। एंड बिकॉज ऑफ सरप्लस फूड प्रोडक्शन, because of surplus food production, a lot of people can get out of agriculture and start specializing. तो ट्रेड एंड क्राफ्ट्स का भी जो है आपको एक इमर्जेंस देखने को मिलेगा। a lot of people don't need to participate in agriculture, so you will see that a lot of people will start doing other trades. so urbanization का भी आपको एक यहाँ पर स्टार्ट देखने को मिलेगा, ठीक है। so this shift from pastoralism to agriculture is linked with a number of other developments which I just described. Like I explained to you कि private property का concept was there in the Rig Vedic period in the form of cows. Now that private property का concept will start getting reflected in the form of land, right? So land ownership जो ऋग वैदिक पीरियड के अंदर थी वो कम्युनल थी, राइट? धीरे धीरे आप देखेंगे लेटर वैदिक पीरियड आते आते कि जो आपका लैंड है दैट बिकम्स अ मैटर ऑफ प्राइवेट प्रॉपर्टी, ठीक है? धीरे धीरे टैक्सेशन का कंसेप्ट आ जाएगा, लैंड ग्रांट्स का भी कंसेप्ट जो है धीरे धीरे आने लग जाएगा, ठीक है? सो आपने एनसीईआरटीज अगर पढ़ी है तो यू वुड हैव कम अक्रॉस दिस टर्म बली. सो बली इज बेसिकली अ फॉर्म ऑफ वॉलेंट्री ऑफरिंग, वॉलेंट्री टैक्स जो कि आप पे करते हैं ऋग वैदिक पीरियड के दौरान. दिस बिकम्स कंपल्सरी इन द लेटर वैदिक पीरियड, ठीक है? इमर्जेंस ऑफ ट्रेड एंड क्राफ्ट के बारे में मैंने आपको ऑलरेडी एक्सप्लेन कर दिया है कि ऋग वैदिक पीरियड वाज नॉट अ पीरियड ऑफ वेरी हाई लेवल ऑफ प्रॉस्पेरिटी, ठीक है? तो व्हेन you have to take care of your food requirements on almost, let us say, a day to day basis, so you are not very settled, you are not very secured, right? So specialization was minimal because it's not as if that your food is guaranteed. But the moment food becomes guaranteed because of surplus production in the later Vedic period, so trade starts expanding. ये चीज आपको जरूर अपने आंसर के अंदर लिखनी है. करेंसी स्टार्ट्स इमर्जिंग. आप आंसर में जरूर लिखिएगा कि ऋग वैदिक पीरियड के दौरान बार्टर वाज द नेम ऑफ द गेम. मोस्टली जो एक्सचेंज हो रहा था दैट वाज बार्टर ड्रिवन. लेटर वैदिक पीरियड आते आते आप देखेंगे कि करेंसी का जो यूटिलाइजेशन है वो बढ़ने लग जाएगा. स्पेशलाइज क्राफ्ट्स का इमर्जेंस सच एज पॉटरी, मेटलर्जी, वीविंग, ये थोड़ा बहुत पहले भी होता था बट एडवांस लेवल के ऊपर आपको जो है ये देखने को मिलेगा इन द लेटर वैदिक पीरियड. दिस इज समथिंग दैट यू हैव टू मेंशन, राइट? जो रिलीजियस प्रैक्टिसेस एंड रिचुअल्स है इसको आप चाहो तो सोसाइटी के अंदर भी मेंशन कर सकते हो, सोसाइटल चेंजेस के अंदर, या फिर आप इसको एक अलग से सब हेडिंग बना के भी मेंशन कर सकते हो. सिंस 150 वर्ड्स का आंसर है तो आप इसको सोसाइटी के अंदर मर्ज करके भी लिख सकते हो. इट्स योर चॉइस, राइट? सो वी स्टार्ट शिफ्टिंग फ्रॉम नेचर वर्शिप टू रिचुअलिज्म. तो नेचर वर्शिप का मतलब क्या है कि पहले हम लोग जो है जैसे इंद्र हो गए, अग्नि हो गए, एक्सेट्रा, इनको हम लोग काफी रिस्पेक्ट करा करते थे, राइट? नेचर वर्शिप बहुत ज्यादा थी बिकॉज अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं थी नेचर की, डर लगता था, राइट? सो वी यूज टू ट्राई टू पैसिफाई दीज एलिमेंट्स ऑफ नेचर. सो अग्नि की काफी वर्शिप थी, इंद्र की काफी वर्शिप थी, वरुणा की काफी वर्शिप थी, राइट? एंड सैक्रिफाइसेस थे लेकिन उतने ज्यादा इलेबोरेट नहीं थे. बट लेटर वैदिक पीरियड आते आते ये हो जाएगा दोस्तों कि with the ascendancy of the brahmanas, right, with the ascendancy of the brahmanas, आप देखेंगे जो रिचुअल्स है they are becoming more and more complex, sacrifices are becoming more and more complex such as अश्वमेध, राजसूय, right? so ये सारी चीजें आपको देखने को मिलेंगे. अश्वमेध यज्ञ वगैरह का जो एक डिस्क्रिप्शन है वो भी यहाँ पर दे रखा है. तो आपको जो भी आप पॉइंट्स लिखेंगे आंसर के अंदर हमारे को भेजेंगे तो उसके दौरान आपको यही करना है कि जितने ज्यादा आप अपने पॉइंट्स के साथ एग्जांपल्स दे सको उतना अच्छा होगा. और आपको सारे सारे सेंटेंस देने की जरूरत नहीं है. आप जो है अपने आंसर्स के पॉइंट्स को जो है शॉर्ट पॉइंट्स रखिए. एग्जामिनर को देखते ही वर्ड समझ में आ जाएगा कि आपको मैटर मालूम है. कंक्लूजन भी आपको उसी प्रकार से देना है कि जो ट्रांजिशन है फ्रॉम ऋग वैदिक टू लेटर वैदिक पीरियड ये एक बहुत ही क्रिटिकल फेज है इंडियन सोसाइटी एंड इकोनॉमी के एवोल्यूशन का. क्योंकि लेटर वैदिक पीरियड के कई सारे जो फैसेट्स हैं वो हमारे को आज भी हमारे सोसाइटी के अंदर देखने को मिलते हैं कि अग्रेरियन सोसाइटी हम आज भी है, हायरार्किकल वर्ना सिस्टम को हम आज भी ऑब्लिटरेट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, स्टेटस ऑफ वुमेन वी आर स्टिल ट्राइंग टू एम्पावर एंड वी आर स्टिल ट्राइंग टू इंप्रूव द स्टेटस ऑफ वुमेन, प्राइवेट प्रॉपर्टी हमारे समाज के अंदर आज भी है, रिचुअलिज्म हमारे समाज के अंदर आज भी है. तो कहीं ना कहीं ये जो चेंज हुआ है फ्रॉम द ऋग वैदिक पीरियड टू लेटर वैदिक पीरियड दिस इज एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट. सो दिस इज वन क्वेश्चन डन. I hope that you are appreciating the content that we are providing to you. We would love to hear from you. What is it that you think about our content? हमने कोई जल्दीबाजी में वीडियोस नहीं बनाएंगे, आराम आराम से बनाएंगे. आप चाहिए तो डबल स्पीड के ऊपर देख सकते हो, ठीक है? मूविंग अहेड टू द सेकंड क्वेश्चन. सेकंड क्वेश्चन भी बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन है, बहुत डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन मैं बोलूंगा ये क्वेश्चन को, क्योंकि कोई भी बच्चा, आम बच्चा जो है इस क्वेश्चन को आसानी से टैकल नहीं कर पाएगा अनलेस एंड अनटिल आपका हिस्ट्री ऑप्शनल है और आपने पल्लवास ऑफ कांची का जो कंट्रीब्यूशन टू आर्ट एंड लिटरेचर है उसको खास कर पढ़ के रखा हुआ है, राइट? वी विल बी मेकिंग गोइंग अहेड स्टैंड अलोन क्वेश्चन बैंक्स फॉर आर्ट एंड कल्चर ऑल्सो. वी विल बी ऑफरिंग स्टैंड अलोन टेस्ट फॉर आर्ट एंड कल्चर ऑल्सो, जिसमें हम आपको 20 क्वेश्चन आर्ट एंड कल्चर के करवाएंगे ताकि आर्ट एंड कल्चर का प्रॉब्लम ही आपका खत्म हो जाए वंस एंड फॉर ऑल. ये आगे चलते हुए इस प्रकार के वीडियोस हम बनाने वाले हैं आपके लिए. आप लोग भी अपनी अपनी डिमांड्स क्या है वीडियोस की वो हमें बता सकते हैं, उसके हिसाब से हम लोग वीडियोस बनाएंगे आपके लिए, राइट? टेस्ट्स बनवाएंगे आपके लिए और आपको प्रैक्टिस करवाएंगे. देखिए दोस्तों, हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव यहाँ पर जो है इस चीज को मोनेटाइज करने का यही है कि हम आपसे एक सीरियस प्रैक्टिस चाहते हैं, हम आपके साथ एक सीरियस रिलेशनशिप बना के रखना चाहते हैं, राइट? जो स्टूडेंट अच्छा स्टूडेंट है, जिसको प्रैक्टिस करनी है, जिसको लगता है कि हाँ उसको इस चीज में इंटरेस्ट आ रहा है, हम उसके साथ काम करने में बेहद ज्यादा इंटरेस्टेड है। ठीक है, चलिए पल्लवास ऑफ कांची की बात करते हैं। तो जो पल्लवास ऑफ कांची है, इन्होंने 3rd सेंचुरी से लेकर 9th सेंचुरी सी तक दे प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन शेपिंग द कल्चरल लैंडस्केप ऑफ साउथ इंडिया। ठीक है, extremely strong dynasty I would say, and extremely strong impact on art, architecture as well as literature। ठीक है, सो पर्टिकुलरली अगर आपको कुछ किंग्स के नाम लेने हैं जो कि आपको लेने चाहिए, तो यू मस्ट मेंशन द नेम्स ऑफ महेंद्र वर्मन एंड नरसिम्हा वर्मन, यू मस्ट मेंशन। ठीक है, यू मस्ट मेंशन द वर्ड द्रविडियन आर्ट फॉर्म्स। तो कुछ जो मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट वर्ड्स हैं, उसको मैं अभी आपको येलो में भी हाईलाइट करके देना स्टार्ट करूंगा, ताकि आपको समझ में आए कि हाँ ये चीज तो हमारे को मेंशन करनी ही करनी है, चाहे कुछ भी हो जाए, राइट। तो ये सारी चीजें आपको मेंशन करनी है। ठीक है, अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल पहले बात करते हैं कंट्रीब्यूशन टू आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर के बारे में। अब आप देख रहे हैं क्वेश्चन आपको सीधा सीधा बता रहा है कि भाई बता दो आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर में क्या है। तो आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर में आप एक तो रॉक कट आर्किटेक्चर बता दीजिए, ठीक है, उसके अंदर आप ये एग्जाम्पल दे दीजिए। उसके बाद आप स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल्स बता दीजिए। उसके बाद जो है आप एवोल्यूशन ऑफ द्रविडियन आर्किटेक्चर को एक्सप्लेन कर दीजिए थोड़ा सा, राइट। और फिर स्कल्पचर और आइकोनोग्राफी में चले जाइए। तो बहुत ब्यूटीफुल तरीके से मैं आपको भी सारी चीजें एक्सप्लेन करने वाला हूँ। ठीक है, तो देखिए सबसे पहला जो टेम्पल्स हमने क्रिएट करे दैट इज रॉक कट आर्किटेक्चर। मतलब हम स्टैंड अलोन स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल्स बनाना धीरे धीरे सीखेंगे, हमें आता नहीं है वो बनाना। तो हमने क्या करा कि एग्जिस्टिंग पहाड़ है, from the existing mountain, from the existing hillside, we are cutting out what eventually becomes a temple, right? So these are your cave temples। ठीक है, they are seen across many parts of the country including in North India। ठीक है, so महेंद्र वर्मन 1 के दौरान, right, मंडकपट्टू टेम्पल इन तमिलनाडु दैट वाज बिल्ट बाय महेंद्र वर्मन 1। ठीक है, सो दिस इज अ वेरी ब्यूटीफुल वेरी फैसिनेटिंग एग्जांपल ऑफ रॉक कट आर्किटेक्चर। ठीक है, सो वुडन से स्टोन बेस्ड कंस्ट्रक्शन जाने के दौरान, वुडन से स्टोन बेस्ड कंस्ट्रक्शन के अंदर जाने के दौरान रॉक कट आर्किटेक्चर इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट स्टेपिंग स्टोन। ठीक है, जो इसका फोटोग्राफ मैंने आपके सामने यहाँ पर रखा है ताकि आप लोगों की इमेजिनेशन अच्छी रहे। स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल्स भी उन्होंने बहुत सारे बनाए। ठीक है, जैसे ये स्टैंड अलोन टेम्पल आप यहाँ पर देख सकते हैं, राइट। तो दिस इज योर ब्यूटीफुल शोर टेम्पल एट ममलापुरम और महाबलीपुरम। ठीक है, इसे बिल्ड करवाया था नरसिम्हा वर्मन 2 के अंदर, वन ऑफ द अर्लीस्ट स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल्स इन साउथ इंडिया। ऑब्वियसली इट इज स्टिल स्टैंडिंग और इसकी मान्यता बहुत ज्यादा है दोस्तों, राइट। सो नरसिम्हा वर्मन 2 राजसिम्हा जिसे कहते थे, राजसिम्हा, सो ही स्टार्टेड स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल्स मेड फ्रॉम स्टोन ब्लॉक्स। क्योंकि तब तक टेक्नोलॉजी इवॉल्व हो चुकी थी, कॉन्फिडेंस आ चुका था, एक्सपेरिमेंट हो चुके होंगे, एंड ये हमने करवाया। उसके साथ साथ पंचरथास एट ममलापुरम, दिस इज ऑल्सो वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एग्जाम्पल जो कि आपको देना है, राइट। सो दीज आर एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट एग्जाम्पल्स विच मस्ट फॉर्म अ पार्ट ऑफ योर आंसर्स। ठीक है, बिकॉज एग्जामिनर एग्जैक्टली यही प्रकार के वर्ड्स को आपके आंसर के अंदर सबसे पहले ढूंढेगा। तो ये वर्ड्स आपके आंसर में होने ही चाहिए। ठीक है, तो आप देख सकते हैं यहाँ पर कि जो पंचरथास एट ममलापुरम है, सो दे आर एसेंशियली योर 5 मोनोलिथिक स्ट्रक्चर्स। मोनोलिथिक का मतलब ये है कि एक रॉक से बना हुआ स्ट्रक्चर है ये। ठीक है, तो चैरियट्स वगैरह हमने बनाए हैं। ठीक है, उसके बाद आप देखेंगे एवोल्यूशन ऑफ द्रविडियन आर्किटेक्चर की अगर बात करें। ठीक है, सो द आइडिया ओवर हियर इज दैट दे स्टार्टेड यूजिंग विमानास, they started creating mandapas, that is pillared halls, they started creating intricate sculptures, and ये जो विमानास, मंडपास एंड इंट्रिकेट स्कल्पचर बनाने का जो रीति रिवाज है, you will see that all future dynasties including the great Cholas, they will also be using a very similar style of architecture. We study about this in art and architecture on a regular basis, so आप appreciate करेंगे, right, that in any given examination they can ask you a question based on this. ठीक है, so there is the kalasha, there is the amalaka, there is the shikhara which is called vimana, there is a garbhagriha, right. So these are some important words that you have to be familiar with. There is a mandapa, right. So this form of architecture का एक और एग्जाम्पल है कैलाशनाथ टेम्पल इन कांचीपुरम, अगेन बिल्ड बाय नरसिम्हा वर्मन 2। ठीक है, ये द्रविडियन टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर का बहुत ही ब्यूटीफुल एग्जाम्पल है। यहाँ पर आपको काफी अच्छे स्कल्पचर्स वगैरह भी देखने को मिलेंगे। आप देख सकते हैं कि कितना ज्यादा डिटेल यहाँ पर स्कल्पचरिंग करी गई है। ऑल्दो द इमेज इज स्मॉल, राइट, आप नजदीक से देखेंगे तो ऑब्वियस ही बात है आपको ज्यादा बेटर दिखाई देगा, बट आई एम श्योर यू कैन सी दैट दीज आर नॉट योर प्लेन वॉल्स। हर एक हर एक पॉइंट जहां पर भी कुछ करा जा सकता है वहां पर हमने कुछ ना कुछ स्कल्पचरिंग कर दी है, विच ब्रिंग्स अस टू अवर नेचुरल नेक्स्ट टॉपिक, that what is the contribution to sculpture and iconography, राइट। सो आइकोनोग्राफिक इनोवेशन काफी खतरनाक है, यानी कि जो आइकॉन्स वगैरह हम दीवार पे बना रहे हैं, पिलर्स पे बना रहे हैं, बहुत खतरनाक लेवल के ऊपर लेकर जाके बना रहे हैं, मतलब एकदम मचा दिया दोस्तों, राइट। आपको जरूर इसके अंदर आंसर्स के अंदर लिखना है कि शिवा, विष्णु एज वेल एज अदर फिगर्स फ्रॉम हिंदू माइथोलॉजी को जो है स्कल्पचर्स के फॉर्म के अंदर, आइकॉन्स के फॉर्म के अंदर दिया गया है, राइट। अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल शिवा को उनके फेमस नटराजा फॉर्म के अंदर एज वेल एज शिवा को उनके दक्षिणामूर्ति फॉर्म के अंदर जो है स्कल्पचरिंग करी गई है, उनके आइकॉन को बनाकर प्लेस करा गया है। आप ये देख सकते हैं कि जो दक्षिणामूर्ति यानी कि जो टीचर वाला जो शिवा का रूप है वो भी आपको यहाँ पर देखने को मिलने लग रहा है, राइट। आप देख सकते हैं कि आजू बाजू में डिसाइपल्स है और शिव जी बीच में एकदम स्वैग के अंदर बैठे हैं दोस्तों, विथ नो डिसरिस्पेक्ट, ठीक है। आप देखेंगे दोस्तों रिलीफ स्कल्पचर्स भी काफी सारे बने हुए हैं। रिलीफ स्कल्पचर का सबसे बेस्ट एग्जांपल जो कि आपको देना रहेगा वो है डिसेंट ऑफ द गैंजेस, अर्जुनास पेनेंस भी कहा जाता है, इसे भी आप महाबलीपुरम में ही पाते हैं, राइट। तो ये फोटोग्राफ आई एम श्योर आपने एनसीईआरटीज में जरूर देखी होगी, राइट। तो जो पल्लवास है दे एक्सेल्ड इन बास रिलीफ स्कल्पचर। सो व्हाट इज बास रिलीफ स्कल्पचर? बास रिलीफ स्कल्पचर का मतलब ये होता है कि ये जो काम है, राइट, इसके अंदर कैसा है कि बैकग्राउंड से ये बहुत बैकग्राउंड शैलो है, यानी कि बोलने का मतलब ये है कि अगर सपोज ये बैकग्राउंड है तो स्कल्पचर जो है बहुत ज्यादा डीप नहीं जा रहा है, इस प्रकार का नहीं है, इस प्रकार का काम नहीं है सपोज फॉर एग्जाम्पल, राइट। क्योंकि इसमें आप देख रहे हैं कि डेप्थ ज्यादा है, इसमें आप देख रहे हैं कि डेप्थ कम है, शैलो है। दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ बास रिलीफ, ठीक है। कि जो डेप्थ है, सपोर्टिंग बैकग्राउंड की जो डेप्थ है वो शैलो है, ठीक है। तो आप देखेंगे कि चाहे केव टेम्पल्स हो, चाहे रॉक कट श्राइन्स हो, सब जगह रिलीफ स्कल्पचर्स आपको जो है देखने को मिल रहे हैं, ठीक है। सो आर्टिस्टिक ग्रैंडवॉर तो है ही है, रिलीजियस नैरेटिव भी आपको साथ साथ में देखने को मिल रहा है। सो दिस इज एन ओपन एयर रिलीफ, ठीक है, एंड इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट द माइथोलॉजिकल डिसेंट ऑफ सेक्रेड रिवर गंगा। So this is something which is a must mention. So as you can see that in my preceding discussion I have given you a lot of examples. I have talked about Shore Temple, I have talked about Kailash Nath, I have talked about descent of Ganga, I have talked about so many different temples की मैंने बात करी है, कौन से रूलर ने बनवाया था, उसकी क्या खास बात है, starting from rock cut और cave temples to standalone structural temples, सारी चीजें मैंने आपको फ्रॉम एन आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इंक्लूडिंग आइकोनोग्राफी एज वेल एज स्कल्पचरिंग बता दी है। आपको ये सब अपने आंसर्स में मेंशन करना है। अब बात करते हैं लिटरेचर एंड लैंग्वेज की, ठीक है, क्योंकि लिटरेचर में भी कंट्रीब्यूशन क्या है पूछा है। तो पल्लवास का कैसा है ना दोस्तों, थोड़ा सा सेकुलर अप्रोच दिखने को मिल रहा है, इन द सेंस कि उन्होंने संस्कृत को तो पेटरनाइज करा ही करा, साथ साथ में तमिल को भी बहुत भारी तरीके से पेटरनाइज करा दोस्तों, राइट। तो कोई भेदभाव आपको यहाँ पर देखने को नहीं मिल रहा है, ठीक है। अब जैसे फॉर इंस्टेंस महेंद्र वर्मन वन, ठीक है, सो ये खुद अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़े राइटर है, राइट। महेंद्र वर्मन ने एक प्ले लिखा है जिसका नाम है मत्त विलासा प्रहासना, ठीक है। सो इट इज बेसिकली सटायर ऑन रिलीजियस हिपोक्रेसी। मैं जब भी इसको पढ़ता हूं तो मुझे ओ माय गॉड मूवी याद आ जाती है अक्षय कुमार की। अगेन माय ऑब्जेक्टिव इज नेवर टू मेक फन और रिडिक्यूल, मैं सिर्फ चीजों को थोड़ा आपके लिए रिलेटेबल बनाने की कोशिश करता हूँ, राइट। सो किसी भी साल के अंदर आपको प्रीलिम के अंदर भी ये प्रकार का क्वेश्चन पूछा जा सकता है, बी अलर्ट, राइट, कि ये जो मत्त विलासा प्रहासना है, हु वाज द ऑथर ऑफ दिस, सो दैट इज महेंद्र वर्मन वन, संस्कृत प्ले है ये, राइट। सो आपको ये दिखाई देने लग रहा है कि राइट फ्रॉम द टॉप जो है इंटेलेक्चुअल स्टैंडर्ड्स को सेट करा जा रहा है। डेवलपमेंट ऑफ तमिल लिटरेचर इज हैपनिंग इन अ वेरी बिग वे, राइट। सो संस्कृत को तो रॉयल पेट्रनेज था ही, रूलर्स ऑल्सो सपोर्टेड तमिल लिटरेचर, ठीक है। सो इस दौरान अगेन दिस इज अ प्रीलिम्स अलर्ट, अगले साल आपको ये प्रीलिम्स में पूछा जा सकता है, राइट, कि जो अलवर सेंट्स है ना, AVNS आपको ऐसे करके याद करना है। अलवर सेंट्स वैष्णवाइट्स थे, NS यानी कि नयनर सेंट्स शैवाइट्स थे, ठीक है। तो इस प्रकार से जो है ये सेंट्स इस दौरान जो है काफी इन्होंने अच्छा काम डेवलप करा है, राइट। दे क्रिएटेड अ लॉट ऑफ भक्ति लिटरेचर, दे क्रिएटेड अ लॉट ऑफ भक्ति रिलेटेड वर्शिपिंग वाला ट्रेंड, ठीक है। एंड अब जैसे नम्मालवर, अप्पार, दे लेड द फाउंडेशन फॉर भक्ति मूवमेंट इन साउथ इंडिया, ठीक है। तो भक्ति मूवमेंट अपने आप में एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है जो किसी भी साल के अंदर पूछा जा सकता है। गोइंग अहेड हम आपको इसके बारे में भी काफी कुछ पढ़ाएंगे, राइट। अगर आप बात करेंगे सो पल्लवास दे वर वेरी हेल्पफुल इन क्रिएशन ऑफ दिस ग्रंथा स्क्रिप्ट, राइट। सो यू आर एबल टू राइट संस्कृत इन तमिल स्पीकिंग रीजन्स, राइट। ये एक अलग प्रकार की स्क्रिप्ट है टू राइट संस्कृत इन तमिल स्पीकिंग रीजन, ठीक है। एंड ये जो ग्रंथा स्क्रिप्ट है, इट इन्फ्लुएंस द एवोल्यूशन ऑफ योर मॉडल तमिल स्क्रिप्ट एज वेल एज अदर साउथ इंडियन स्क्रिप्ट्स, ठीक है। सो दिस इज, यू विल सी दैट दिस ग्रंथा स्क्रिप्ट, दिस इज समथिंग विच यू विल सी इन महाबलीपुरम के टेम्पल्स एक्सेट्रा के अंदर, इंस्क्रिप्शंस एक्सेट्रा के अंदर, राइट। सो दिस ग्रंथा स्क्रिप्ट इन अपने आप में एक बहुत ही अच्छा पॉइंटर है जो कि आपको मेंशन करना चाहिए। रिलीजियस एंड कल्चरल इन्फ्लुएंस की अगर मैं बात करूं, सो आई हैव ऑलरेडी स्पोकन अबाउट द फैक्ट दैट दे हैव प्रमोटेड शैविज्म एज वेल एज वैष्णविज्म, ठीक है। सो पल्लवास दे वर देमसेल्व्स आर्डेंट फॉलोअर्स ऑफ शैविज्म, बट दे वर आल्सो पेट्रोनाइजिंग वैष्णविज्म, ठीक है। तो ये प्रकार का जो सिंक्रेटिक अप्रोच है, दिस इज वेरी वेरी हेल्पफुल, राइट। ये सिंक्रेटिक अप्रोच इज वेरी वेरी हेल्पफुल, ये आपको जरूर मेंशन करने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए, राइट। अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल ले लीजिए कि जो आपका कैलाशनाथ टेम्पल है कांचीपुरम में, दैट इज डेडिकेटेड टू लॉर्ड शिवा, राइट। बट जो आपके वैकुंठ पेरुमल टेम्पल है, दैट इज डेडिकेटेड टू विष्णु, ठीक है। तो आपको देखने को मिल रहा है यहाँ पर कि हमारा एक ब्रॉड बेस्ड अप्रोच हम लेकर चलने लग रहे हैं। एंड द बेस्ट पार्ट इज कि आप देखेंगे कि चाहे इट इज पल्लवास और लेटर ऑन चोलास, तो आप देखेंगे कि जो साउथ इंडियन कल्चर है वो ओवरसीज हमने काफी एक्सपोर्ट करा है, राइट। अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल कंबोडिया एज वेल एज इंडोनेशिया, इसके अंदर के जो टेम्पल्स है, सो यू विल सी दैट देयर कंस्ट्रक्शन स्टाइल है ना, काफी मिलता जुलता है। सो यू कैन कहीं ना कहीं आप देख सकते हो, इट्स नॉट जस्ट पल्लवास बट लेटर ऑन चोलास एज वेल, कहीं ना कहीं यू विल बी एबल टू सी दैट द टेम्पल्स ऑफ अंकोर वट इन कंबोडिया, they bear a very strong resemblance to Pallava architectural principles. तो कहीं ना कहीं कल्चरल एक्सचेंज जरूर हो रहा था, ये चीज आपको ध्यान में रखनी है, राइट। सो द इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट दैट यू हैव टू हाईलाइट इन द कंक्लूजन इज दैट दीज आर लास्टिंग कंट्रीब्यूशंस। आज तक हम बात करें 2024 के अंदर, आज तक ये कंट्रीब्यूशंस रेलेवेंट है, राइट। चाहे रॉक कट टेम्पल्स हो, चाहे स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल्स हो, चाहे द्रविडियन आर्किटेक्चर हो, राइट, चाहे तमिल लिटरेचर और संस्कृत लिटरेचर हो, राइट, ये आज तक रेलेवेंट है। एंड ये जो हमारा जो सांस्कृतिक धरोहर है, जो कल्चरल लेगेसी है, दिस इज समथिंग विच इज नेवर गोइंग टू बी वॉश्ड आउट, राइट। एंड दिस लेगेसी कंटिन्यूज टू रेजोनेट इवन इन द प्रेजेंट डे कल्चरल प्रैक्टिसेस इन साउथ इंडिया, राइट। मूविंग अहेड टू द थर्ड क्वेश्चन, राइट, I would really invite everybody to do answer writing practice. You can start with assisted answer writing practice. Slowly and steadily, I will take you towards 110% readiness for answer writing for any and every kind of question that you may witness in the examination. But for that, you need to be committed. I need commitment from you, and I will be committed towards you. And the more I see commitment from you, the more you will see commitment from me and my team. And this will be a very, very, helpful approach for everybody. ठीक है। टीचिंग इज अ पैशन प्रोजेक्ट ऑफ माइन, आई डोंट नीड टू टीच, राइट, बिकॉज आई हैव अदर various other sources of income. I have worked very hard after giving civil services ka mains twice. I went to IIM Calcutta to do MBA. I'm already doing a job. So this is my passion project. I'm doing it out of a hobby. I'm doing it out of a passion, right? So this is something that I want to do for you guys, ठीक है। And also for myself, क्योंकि मेरे को बहुत शांति मिलती है जब मैं पढ़ाता हूँ, तो ठीक है। What were the events that led to Quit India movement? ठीक है, and point out the results. I would classify this again as an easy question because almost any serious candidate will study Quit India movement, will study probably 10 different things that happened in the background of Quit India movement. ठीक है, so this is a very easy question I would say. ठीक है, so जो Quit India movement है, इसे हम अगस्त क्रांति भी कहते हैं. We are calling it a watershed movement because after Quit India movement there is not going to be any U-turn in terms of demanding independence. ठीक है, मतलब एक बार आपने क्विट इंडिया बोल दिया मतलब फिर बोल दिया, राइट, आपने कमिट कर दी तो अपने आप की भी नहीं सुनोगे, ठीक है। सो दिस मूवमेंट वाज लॉन्च बाय इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस अंडर द लीडरशिप ऑफ महात्मा गांधी, ठीक है। एंड जो रूट कॉज था, रूट कॉज अमंग अदर थिंग्स फॉर लॉन्चिंग दिस मूवमेंट वाज फ्रस्ट्रेशन ऑफ इंडियंस, बिकॉज वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 स्टार्ट हो चुका था, इंडिया वॉज ड्रैग्ड इनटू वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 विदाउट कंसेंट, वर्ल्ड वॉर 2 के नेगेटिव रैमिफिकेशंस इंडिया के ऊपर आने लग रहे थे. We were absolutely fed up and frustrated with Britishers, right? Already we had done non-cooperation movement, already we had done a civil disobedience movement, and natural progression was Quit India movement, right? So this is something that we launched with the slogan of do or die, ठीक है, करो या मरो, ठीक है, which clearly shows the determination, the political maturity and the maturity of the independence movement by this point of time. ठीक है, so what are the important events which you have to try and highlight, which is very very important. So the events that you will try to highlight is this first one, क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट के अंदर, राइट, विच इज द इम्पैक्ट ऑफ वर्ल्ड वॉर टू ऑन इंडिया. तो आपको ईयर मेंशन करने रहेंगे. 1939, ठीक है, इज व्हेन वर्ल्ड वॉर टू स्टार्टेड and we were dragged into the war on the side of Britishers without even any consultation, right? So the idea is that this kind of disregard, this kind of disrespect of Indian opinion is something which was not warranted, because by this point of time Britishers realized that Indians are gaining political maturity, they are participating in the political arena, etc etc. So ये शोभा नहीं देता है, right? Viceroy declared India as a belligerent power, as a party to the war, right? And उसका जो severe economic impact है, apart from the fact that we were not consulted, that is something which is really frustrating. Around the time of Quit India movement, क्रिप्स मिशन भी आया था इंडिया मार्च 1942 के अंदर, right? Please note that in prelims examination of civil services as well as PSC, they are fond of asking you questions such as ki, arrange these events in the order in which they occurred and all that, right? So these are very easy questions provided that आपने study करा है, तो please study अच्छे से करिए, right? So क्रिप्स मिशन का जो failure है, that also became a point which led to the launch of Quit India movement, because when Sir Stafford Cripps came to India, he offered dominion status when we were asking for quit India, or we were asking for independence or something like that, ठीक है? तो डोमिनियन स्टेटस तो हमारे को 15 साल पहले चाहिए था, राइट? सो वी वांटेड इमीडिएट इंडिपेंडेंस, बट वी वर गेटिंग डोमिनियन स्टेटस, वी वर नॉट इंटरेस्टेड, राइट? So the idea over here is that we were not happy, and secondly स्टैफोर्ड क्रिप्स मिशन ने ये भी कहा था कि जो प्रोविंसेस है दे कैन ऑप्ट आउट ऑफ द यूनियन. मतलब ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता है कि स्टेट्स जो है बोलेंगे कि नहीं, वी डोंट वांट टू बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द इंडियन यूनियन. ये कोई चॉइस देने वाला मैटर ही नहीं था. सो वी वर एक्सट्रीमली अनहैप्पी विद द क्रिप्स मिशन, राइट? नेचुरली कांग्रेस रिजेक्टेड द क्रिप्स प्रपोजल बिकॉज इट वॉज ऑफरिंग टू लिटिल टू लेट, राइट? तो आपने आई एम श्योर ये सब पढ़ा होगा, तो आपको ये मेंशन करना है. Thirdly, what you will talk about is the growing discontent among the Indian masses. ठीक है, there was food shortages, there was price hike. आज भी अगर food shortage price hike हो जाए तो लोग नाराज हो जाएंगे. तो वो टाइम पे तो food shortage price hike हो ही रहा था. Essential items were in desperate short supply, और इसका proof है बंगाल famine जो कि 1943 के अंदर हुआ था, right? कि the period of extreme shortage was building up, building up, building up, which finally led into the worst human-made disaster that probably the civilization has ever seen across the world, right? So given the fact that एक तो you are not giving any political concessions, ऊपर से you are not making any promises, ऊपर से governance is absolutely pathetic and collapsed. So ये सारी चीजें जो है they are adding fuel to the fire, ठीक है? There is this Atlantic Charter which got created in 1941. So in this Atlantic Charter, US and UK in 1941 they promised self-determination to all nations after World War II, right? So why is it that India will not be self-determining that what happens with itself, right? So इंडिया को उन्होंने इंक्लूड नहीं करा प्रॉमिस ऑफ सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन के अंदर, बिकॉज यू नो राइट दैट इंडिया वाज द लिंचपिन ऑफ द ब्रिटिश एम्पायर. आपको मालूम है कि ब्रिटिश एम्पायर का कोई भी लिंक टूटेगा तो कोई बात नहीं, लेकिन अगर इंडिया टूट जाएगा तो फिर ब्रिटिश एम्पायर ही खत्म हो जाएगा. सो इंडियंस वर वेरी अनहैप्पी विद द फैक्ट दैट दे वर नॉट बीइंग ऑफर्ड सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन, कीपिंग इन माइंड द वर्ड एंड लेटर एंड स्पिरिट ऑफ द अटलांटिक चार्टर, राइट? Apart from that, there was a failure of negotiation, there was rising radicalism, right? So अब जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल ले लीजिए, राइट? सो वी वर इन दिस बैकड्रॉप, आप इतना काफी है, इससे ज्यादा ज्ञान बांटने की जरूरत नहीं है. इन दिस बैकड्रॉप वी लॉन्च्ड द क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट August 8, 1942. So all India Congress Committee, they passed the Quit India resolution, right, in Bombay. Mahatma Gandhi gave the famous do or die speech, right? And Britishers by now they were obviously well prepared. They had seen these kinds of movements being launched earlier. They didn't want to take any kind of risk because of the world war effort that was going on various different fronts. So very quickly they arrested almost the entire top leadership of Congress, including Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, right? And this became a spontaneous movement, right, in the sense that all the major leaders, they were behind the bars. So आप समझ सकते हैं कि political maturity इतनी ज़्यादा हो चुकी है कि even when the leaders are behind the bars, still people are able to carry the movement ahead as if it didn't really matter. So second rung of leadership जो है, second rung of leadership, third rung of leadership आप देख सकते हैं कि यहाँ पर develop हो चुकी है. What is the result of Quit India movement? See, the result is, it's not as that Quit India movement got us independence immediately. but it definitely laid the path towards independence which we achieved in 1947 finally, right? So this, it was a widespread public uprising. We saw literally hundreds of mass protests almost across all the towns of India. आपको mass protests, strikes, हड़ताल देखने को मिलेंगे, right? आप देखेंगे कि स्टूडेंट्स, वर्कर्स, पेजेंट्स सब लोग पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं। आप देखेंगे बिहार, उत्तर प्रदेश, बंगाल, सब जगह जो है आपको मूवमेंट का ये दिखाई देगा। मूवमेंट विल टर्न वायलेंट इन अ वैरायटी ऑफ डिफरेंट प्लेसेस, राइट? बट देन कांग्रेस लीडरशिप विल से दैट वी आर बिहाइंड द बार्स, व्हाट कैन वी डू? You can release us, we'll control the movement, right? So this movement will become violent, but this movement will not be withdrawn. We are way ahead of Chauri Chaura now, ठीक है? Obviously the consequence will be brutal British repression, right? So nearly 1 lakh people, they were arrested. There was huge amount of censorship that was placed upon media. Public gatherings were banned, right? Martial law like situation was imposed, right? And people are also by this time extremely trained in political, strategy and one-upmanship. So we also start jail bharo andolan, because ab jail jana was not something that you were afraid of, was not something that you were ashamed of, right? Aruna Asaf Ali, who is known as the grand old lady of India, again a prelims alert, आपको पूछा जा सकता है, please ध्यान में रखिए. So Aruna Asaf Ali emerged as a prominent leader after the senior Congress leaders were jailed. If I am not wrong, कोई सोहा अली खान की शायद मूवी भी आई है, सारा अली खान या जो भी अली खान है, राइट? सैफ अली खान की जो डॉटर है, उनकी मूवी भी आई है शायद इस चीज के ऊपर, वो भी आप देख सकते हैं, राइट? स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ पैरेलल गवर्नमेंट्स और प्रति सरकार, राइट? दे वर कॉल्ड प्रति सरकार, पैरेलल गवर्नमेंट्स, ठीक है? सो लोगों ने जो है लोकल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन अपने हाथों में ले ली, राइट? जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल सतारा, तामलुक, राइट? सो वी क्रिएटेड लोकल अथॉरिटीज, एंड फॉर a good number of days and weeks we saw that local administration was run by locals, and Britishers were able to regain control only after a lot of mashakkat, after a lot of मेहनत, right? So तामलुक के अंदर तो हमने पैरेलल गवर्नमेंट काफी लंबे टाइम तक चला दी, which again goes to show that the political maturity had increased in India quite a bit. You have to acknowledge that immediate success was not there, but the impact was definitely deep, that the long term impact was positive. Okay, it showed that masses were willing to rise. It shows that even in the absence of central leadership, things can be very, very difficult for the Britishers to control, right? And even though Winston Churchill may want to believe whatever he may want to believe, but this is a point of no return, right? अब इंडिया को एज अ कॉलोनी होल्ड करना will become more and more untenable, more and more difficult. What is the post-war political scenario like? So in the post-war political scenario, there is absolute radicalization, right? The question can only be about negotiation of independence. Nothing else could be discussed, right? And you will see that slowly and steadily there will be increasing pressure from the US, right? There will be a growing anti-colonial sentiment across the world. And Britishers by now have been thoroughly weakened, even though they emerged victorious in World War II, but they have been thoroughly weakened. And finally, we start discussing about transfer of power, right? So you will see the release of Congress leaders in 1944, Shimla Conference in 1945, interim government formation in 1946. You can consider these outcomes which are happening in the immediate aftermath of Quit India movement to be somewhere catalyzed by Quit India movement, right? So in conclusion, it is considered to be a very important and an intense phase of struggle. You will see that a broad spectrum of Indians are participating, not just from a societal point of view, but from a geographical point of view as well. You know that now there is nothing left to discuss except for complete freedom, right? And it showed that yes, while Britishers were able to crush the movement and were able to maintain their grip, but the grip was loosening. That is what the idea over here is, slowly and steadily, right? So this is also a question done. Okay, moving ahead to the next question. So इन्होंने आप देखेंगे कि 3 क्वेश्चंस इन्होंने हिस्ट्री के 10 मार्कर पूछ लिए हैं. अभी आप ज्योग्राफी के क्वेश्चंस देखेंगे, फिर आप सोसाइटी के क्वेश्चंस देखेंगे. उसके बाद यू विल सी दैट 20 मार्कर के अंदर, 15 मार्कर के अंदर भी यही होगा, राइट? कि जो आपके 15 मार्कर के जो क्वेश्चंस हैं, राइट? सो 15 मार्कर क्वेश्चंस भी इसी प्रकार से आएंगे कि पहले आर्ट एंड कल्चर हिस्ट्री के क्वेश्चन आ जाएंगे, फिर ज्योग्राफी के क्वेश्चंस आएंगे, एंड फिर सोसाइटी के क्वेश्चंस आएंगे. सो वेरी स्ट्रक्चर्ड वे टू द क्वेश्चन पेपर. एंड जो क्वेश्चंस है वो भी घुमा फिरा के नहीं पूछ रहा है, सीधे साधे क्वेश्चंस पूछ रहा है, राइट? आपको इंटरप्रिटेशन करने की जरूरत नहीं है, आता है तो आता है, नहीं आता है तो नहीं आता है. देयर वॉज अ पॉइंट इन टाइम, राइट, देयर वॉज अ पॉइंट इन टाइम व्हेन दे यूज्ड टू आस्क क्वेश्चंस वेयर पीपल हैव टू थिंक कि अच्छा क्या पूछ रहा है. आजकल वो सब मेरे को लगता है बंद कर दिया, सीधा सीधा क्वेश्चन पूछता है, आप सीधा साधा जवाब दे दो. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल सीधा साधा क्वेश्चन है कि व्हाट इज सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर राइज SST and how does it affect the formation of tropical cyclone. I would say that this is again an easy question because sea surface temperature rise को आप global warming climate change से लिंक करा के easily बता दोगे. एंड जो भी बच्चा मेंस लिखने जा रहा है उसको एटलीस्ट ट्रॉपिकल साइक्लोन फॉर्मेशन क्या होता है वो तो आपने प्रीलिम्स के अंदर ही पढ़ लिया होगा, राइट. तो ये चीज आपको मालूम होगी ही होगी, राइट. सो अगेन आई वुड से दैट आउट ऑफ द फर्स्ट 3 क्वेश्चंस पल्लवा वाला क्वेश्चन थोड़ा सा ट्रिकी था, राइट. इसके अंदर ये वाला क्वेश्चन इन माय ओपिनियन एटलीस्ट दिस इज अ इजी क्वेश्चन जो कि आप टैकल कर सकते हैं, राइट. सो एसएसटी की अगर हम बात करें, एसएसटी, ठीक है, सो ऑब्वियसली इट इज प्लेइंग अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन डिटरमाइनिंग द क्लाइमेट एंड वेदर सिस्टम्स, ठीक है. नाउ you know that global warming is happening, because of that temperature in general is increasing, so sea surface temperature is also increasing, right. ट्रॉपिकल एंड सब ट्रॉपिकल रीजन्स के अंदर एसएसटी इज इंक्रीजिंग. एंड आप जानते हैं कि साइक्लोन फॉर्मेशन इज डिपेंडेंट अपॉन अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ वार्म वाटर, राइट. वार्म वाटर इज द most important requirement for the formation of cyclones. So naturally you will link this with the formation and intensity of tropical cyclones, because ये जो warm oceans है they provide the much needed energy for cyclone formation, ठीक है. एंड जितना ज्यादा ओशन वार्म होगा उतनी ज्यादा एनर्जी होगी, जितनी ज्यादा एनर्जी होगी और जितना ज्यादा लंबे पीरियड के लिए ओशन वार्म होगा उतने ज्यादा नंबर ऑफ साइक्लोन्स आएंगे. सो वेदर इट इज द इंटेंसिटी और द नंबर ऑफ साइक्लोन्स, बोथ आर unfortunately positively linked with increasing temperature, and this is going to be a reason for massive destruction across a number of coastal regions, not just in India but across the world, ठीक है. सो आपको यहाँ पर सबसे पहले तो सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर राइज को डील करवाना है. सो यू कैन टॉक अबाउट द कॉजेज ऑफ सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर राइज. इसके अंदर यू कैन स्पीक अबाउट ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, ठीक है, that because of the greenhouse effect, because of the accumulation of carbon dioxide, methane and other greenhouse gases, so earth का जो temperature है that is going up, ठीक है. You need not give examples everywhere, but I have given you examples wherever I can. आपको जो examples use करने हैं अपने answers के अंदर वो आप use कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल आईपीसीसी विच इन इटसेल्फ इज बेसिकली अ प्रीलिम्स का टॉपिक, आप आईपीसीसी के बारे में पढ़ लीजिएगा. सो आईपीसीसी जो है वो बताता है कि द एवरेज ग्लोबल ओशन टेम्परेचर इट हैज इंक्रीज बाय 0.11 डिग्री पर डिकेड सिंस 1970s, ठीक है. देन देयर इज एनसो, दैट इज एल नीनो सदर्न ऑसिलेशन, ठीक है. तो एल नीनो सदर्न ऑसिलेशन की वजह से व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट देयर इज वार्मिंग ऑफ द सेंट्रल एंड ईस्टर्न पैसिफिक ओशन, ठीक है, वार्मिंग ऑफ द सेंट्रल एंड ईस्टर्न पैसिफिक ओशन, ठीक है. तो इसके वजह से कैसा होता है कि दुनिया के कहीं ना कहीं कोई ना कोई ओशन के अंदर आपको वार्मिंग देखने को मिलती है, विच इज ऑल्सो हैविंग अ इम्पैक्ट. यू नीड नॉट मेंशन दिस बिकॉज दिस हैज नॉट बीन आस्क्ड डायरेक्टली, राइट. बट आपको एनसो एज अ टॉपिक को पढ़ के रखना चाहिए फ्रॉम अ प्रीलिम्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, राइट. ग्लोबल ओशन हीट कंटेंट की अगर बात करें, सो दैट हैज ऑल्सो बीन इंक्रीजिंग क्वाइट नेचुरली, राइट. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल लीजिए इंडियन ओशन, इट हैज बीन वार्मिंग एट अ रेट ऑफ 0.1 डिग्री सेंटीग्रेड पर डिकेड ओवर द लास्ट 60 ईयर्स, ठीक है. सो वार्मिंग एटमॉस्फेयर, वार्मिंग ओशन. नाउ व्हाट इज द इफेक्ट ऑफ सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर राइज ऑन द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ ट्रॉपिकल साइक्लोन्स. तो यहाँ पर आपको जो है साइक्लोन की थोड़ी सी थियरी को एक्सप्लेन कर देना है कि साइक्लोन्स दे ड्रॉ एनर्जी फ्रॉम वार्म वाटर्स. सो वार्म मॉइस्ट एयर ओवर द ओशन इट राइजेस, एक लो प्रेशर सिस्टम क्रिएट होता है, राइट. And what you see is that evaporation of water takes place, air is rising, condensation takes place, latent heat get released, right. और ये जो latent heat जो release हो रहा है ये energy प्रदान करता है हमारे cyclonic circulations को, right. So what is the sea surface temperature का threshold? So scientists across the world, कहीं पर 26 डिग्री, कहीं पर 27 डिग्री, right. So you can assume that the minimum sea surface temperature that is required फॉर साइक्लोन फॉर्मेशन कैन बी अराउंड 26.5 डिग्रीज. अब ज्यादा से ज्यादा समय के लिए अगर टेम्परेचर इस रेंज के अंदर आजू बाजू में घूम रहा है 26 27 में बिकॉज ऑफ सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर राइज, दैट मीन्स दैट प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ साइक्लोन फॉर्मेशन गोज अप, इंटेंसिटी ऑफ साइक्लोन फॉर्मेशन कैन गो अप, राइट. अब जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपको यहाँ पर एग्जाम्पल जरूर देने चाहिए, ठीक है. जैसे बे ऑफ बंगाल के वार्मिंग की वजह से आप देख सकते हैं कि साइक्लोन अम्फन 2020 गॉट क्रिएटेड, राइट. सुपर साइक्लोनिक स्टेटस भी अम्फन को हमारे को देना पड़ा था, विच इज नथिंग समथिंग दैट वी शुड बी हैप्पी अबाउट. इंटेंसिफिकेशन ऑफ साइक्लोन की अगर हम बात करें, राइट, सो हायर सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर मीन्स रैपिड इंटेंसिफिकेशन ऑफ ट्रॉपिकल स्टॉर्म्स. ठीक है, सो वार्मर द ओशन, मोर मॉइस्चर, मोर एनर्जी, स्ट्रॉन्गर विंड्स, हेवियर रेनफॉल. ठीक है, दैट इज व्हाट यू नीड टू पॉइंट आउट. सो जो अमेरिकन बॉडी है NOAA, so they are predicting that 1 degree rise in SST, they can increase cyclones wind speed by 15%. ठीक है, ये चीज आप मेंशन करना मत भूलिएगा. ठीक है, अगर आप देखेंगे कैटेगरी 4-5 हरिकेन्स, so that has increased in the Atlantic Ocean and scientists are linking it with rising sea surface temperature, right? You will see that cyclones की जो ड्यूरेशन है लाइफ टाइम में वो भी बढ़ने लग रही है, बिकॉज ओवर अ लार्जर एरिया ऑफ the ocean you are getting this kind of condition now, right? Because you are getting so much energy, so cyclones are lasting longer and cyclones are becoming more destructive. ठीक है, यहाँ पर there is a very relevant example that you can give, that hurricane Harvey 2017 Gulf of Mexico, right, continuously energy draw कर रहा था एंड रिकॉर्ड ब्रेकिंग रेनफॉल, कैटास्ट्रोफिक फ्लडिंग टेक्सास के अंदर करवाया था, खत्म होने का नाम ही नहीं ले रहा था हरिकेन हार्वी, राइट? सो द मोमेंट यू स्टार्ट मेंशनिंग एग्जांपल्स, राइट, एग्जांपल्स का फायदा ये होता है दोस्तों कि अगर आपको थ्योरी उतनी ज्यादा अच्छे से याद नहीं भी आ रही है, जो कि अंडरस्टैंडेबल है बिकॉज सिलेबस इतना वास्ट है, लेकिन अगर आप एग्जांपल से अपने थ्योरेटिकल वीकनेसेस को थोड़ा सा ब्रिज कर लेते हैं तो आपको कहीं ना कहीं एग्जामिनर पिनलाइज नहीं करता है. Because of changing sea surface temperature, cyclone tracks are changing. For example, I stay in Bombay, right? So आजकल कैसा होता है ना दोस्तों कि we keep hearing that अच्छा cyclone is passing parallel to the coast of Maharashtra, is entering into Gujarat. Cyclone is entering into some parts of Maharashtra, etc. तो ये बचपन में हमने कभी नहीं देखा था. In my childhood, we had never seen this. ठीक है, this was something which was never seen, never. ठीक है, तो ये जो राइजिंग सी सरफेस टेम्परेचर है, इट इज ऑल्सो चेंजिंग द जोग्राफिकल पैटर्न ऑफ साइक्लोन फॉर्मेशन एंड मूवमेंट, राइट? अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल 2019 के अंदर एक स्टडी करी गई थी बाय नेशनल ओशियानिक एंड एटमॉस्फेरिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, एंड दे सेड दैट मिड लैटिट्यूड रीजन्स, अरेबियन सी के आजू बाजू में, ईस्ट एशिया के अंदर, जहां पर साइक्लोन का इफेक्ट पहले उतना नहीं था, अब वो देखने को मिल रहा है. अरेबियन सी इज द सी विच आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, बॉम्बे के आजू बाजू वाला, राइट? सो दैट्स द आइडिया दैट यू नीड टू कीप इन माइंड. सेकेंडरी इंपैक्ट क्या है राइजिंग एसएसटी का? सो एसएसटी, सो ग्रीन हाउस इफेक्ट की वजह से एसएसटी हो रहा है, एसएसटी की वजह से साइक्लोन हो रहा है, और साइक्लोन की वजह से बहुत सारे सेकेंडरी इफेक्ट्स हो रहे हैं, सच एज इंक्रीज रेनफॉल, फ्लडिंग, इरोजन, स्टॉर्म सर्जेस, मरीन इकोसिस्टम के ऊपर नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट, राइट, एंड सो ऑन. ठीक है, तो आप बात कर सकते हैं ये सब चीज़ों के बारे में. ठीक है, सो आई गेस दैट इतना अगर आपको कंटेंट मालूम है, इतना कंटेंट आपने समझ लिया है, सो इट विल बिकम ईजियर फॉर यू गोइंग अहेड टू बी एबल टू टैकल दीज काइंड्स ऑफ क्वेश्चंस. एंड ऑफ कोर्स आपको मैं अप्रोच समझा रहा हूँ. आई एम गिविंग यू ऑलमोस्ट 90-95% ऑफ द कंटेंट दैट इज रिक्वायर्ड टू आंसर द क्वेश्चन. यू कैन ऐड अ लिटिल बिट फ्रॉम योर साइड एंड देन यू आर रेडी, राइट? लेकिन आप लिखेंगे नहीं, प्रैक्टिस नहीं करेंगे, तब तक आप रेडी होंगे नहीं. So you have to draw this linkage that sea surface temperature because of human induced climate change is intensification of tropical cyclones ka cause, right? And you are having powerful, longer lasting and destructive cyclones which are going into newer areas, causing rainfall, storm surges, coastal communities ko threat and ecosystems ko destruction. And it is very important to undertake steps for climate change mitigation adaptation strategies so that we can protect vulnerable geographies and communities appropriately, right? So this is one more question done. All right, moving ahead to the next question. ठीक है, this is a tricky question. ठीक है, I would say that it's not a very difficult question, but it's not an easy question either. So I would say that somewhere in the middle this question is there. उसका reason मैं आपको बताता हूँ. So we understand migration from rural areas to urban areas. ये क्वेश्चन क्या पूछता है? Why do large cities attract more migrants than smaller towns? So जो माइग्रेशन वर्ड सुनते ही आपके दिमाग में रूरल अर्बन स्टार्ट हो जाता है, कहीं ना कहीं ये क्वेश्चन आपको वो पूछ ही नहीं रहा है. आपको ये क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है कि why is it that large cities tend to attract more migrants than smaller towns? So comparison is urban to urban rather than rural to urban. इसके अंदर यू कैन गेट कंफ्यूज्ड. दिस इज आई एम सेइंग दैट यू डोंट गेट कंफ्यूज्ड. टॉपिक इज द सेम, that there are some positive points about larger towns, there are some negative points about smaller towns. Hence, more migrants are coming to larger towns and less migrants are coming to smaller towns. And you have to give examples. अब आप इसके अंदर एक चीज सीख जाइए हमेशा के लिए, आपको एग्जाम्पल आता है, आप ये अपने आप को बोलना बंद कर दीजिए कि आपको एग्जाम्पल नहीं आता है, राइट? दुनिया के आप 10-12 अलग अलग कंट्रीज के अलग अलग सिटीज का नाम ले दोगे तो एग्जामिनर को समझ में आ जाएगा, राइट? डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के अंदर बांग्लादेश भी आता है, डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के अंदर पाकिस्तान भी आता है, इंडोनेशिया भी आता है, इंडिया भी आता है, कीनिया भी आता है, राइट? तो उठा लीजिए इन्हें, हर एक कंट्री के अंदर से एक दो शहरों का नाम और लिख दीजिए, एग्जाम्पल तैयार हो जाएगा आपको, राइट? सो द एडवांटेज, the unquestionable advantage of large cities is that they are hubs of economic, social and cultural activity. ठीक है, तो आप देखते हैं कि यहाँ पर जो है इन सिटीज के अंदर, बॉम्बे जैसे शहरों के अंदर, आई वुड से बैंगलोर, बॉम्बे, पूना, है ना, कलकत्ता, दिल्ली, राइट? सो पीपल फ्रॉम रूरल एरियाज, पीपल फ्रॉम स्मॉल टाउन्स, दे गेट अट्रैक्टेड because of mostly better opportunities, right? Because of better resources, because of better public services, people are attracted. So you have to, as a good student, you have to mention pull factors and you have to mention push factors, right? तो बॉडी के अंदर आप इसी प्रकार से लिखेंगे, राइट? कि इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज लार्ज सिटीज के अंदर अच्छे हैं इन टर्म्स ऑफ एक्सेस टू जॉब्स, ठीक है? नाउ यू डोंट नीड टू स्टार्ट स्क्रैचिंग योर हेड कि अच्छा अभी हाउ डू आई प्रूव एक्सेस टू जॉब्स. एग्जामिनर नोस दैट द मोमेंट यू मेंशन बॉम्बे, दिल्ली, बैंगलोर, द मोमेंट यू मेंशन इंडस्ट्रियल एंटरप्राइजेस, कमर्शियल एंटरप्राइजेस, सर्विस सेक्टर एंटरप्राइजेस, यानी कि नॉन एग्रीकल्चरल जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटीज विच आर लाइक 365 days काइंड ऑफ जॉब्स, पेरिनियल जॉब्स, नॉट डिपेंडेंट ऑन मॉनसून, वेल पेइंग जॉब्स, हाई पेइंग जॉब्स, प्रोडक्टिविटी वाले जॉब्स, राइट? एस्पिरेशनल जॉब्स. सो opportunity to go from low, whether you are low skilled you will get a job, whether you are high skilled you will get a job, whether you are educated you will get a job, you are uneducated you will get a job. So opportunity set is much bigger in larger cities as compared to smaller towns. The opportunities, especially if you are educated, the opportunity set is very large in larger cities, ठीक है? And the second aspect is higher wages, ठीक है? That the wage differential is also there, ठीक है? So you get a better pay compared to similar job in rural areas. Of course higher wages comes with higher expenditure also, right? No doubt about that, but people tend to focus on this aspect a lot, ठीक है? इसके अंदर you can give example of Bangladesh factory worker in Dhaka earning significantly more than people working in rural areas या smaller towns के अंदर. That's why people would want to shift to Dhaka, right? Dhaka के अंदर there is a very strong base of garments industry, right? So even if you don't know exactly what is happening in Dhaka, what is the wages in Dhaka, but you can logically conclude कि हाँ ये ढाका में हो रहा रहेगा, क्योंकि बॉम्बे के या दिल्ली में अगर ये हो रहा है तो ढाका में भी how difficult is it to imagine that something similar would be happening in Dhaka? Not too difficult, correct? Informal economy, right? अब लार्ज सिटीज के अंदर देर इज अ वाइब्रेंट इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी. सो यू कैन डू स्ट्रीट वेंडिंग, यू कैन पार्टिसिपेट इन कंस्ट्रक्शन वर्क. सो देर इज ट्रिमेंडस स्कोप in urban areas to absorb this labor force which is otherwise disguised unemployed or underemployed in rural areas, right? So even if you are somebody without formal education or skill, you can still find something to do in the informal economies of urban areas. So whether it is Lagos of Nigeria or Karachi of Pakistan, informal economy or street economy, right, ये बहुत strong है, right? एंड आपको ये वापस से आई एम रीअश्योरिंग यू कि आपको मालूम होने की जरूरत नहीं है कि लागोस नाइजीरिया के अंदर इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी है कि नहीं है 100% है, कहाँ जाएगी नहीं आगे तो, राइट? सो दिस इज माय पॉइंट नंबर 1, दैट इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज इन लार्ज सिटीज इन टर्म्स ऑफ जॉब्स, वेजेस एंड इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी, ठीक है? कमिंग टू सर्विसेज, better services and infrastructure. So education and healthcare is definitely better in cities, right? Better schools, better universities, better hospitals, right? They are there. So आपके लिए और आपकी next generation के लिए it makes more sense to have access to this, ठीक है? Availability of public services is better, whether it is transportation, electricity, water supply or sanitation. Of course, you cannot start comparing, you know, what is happening in Dharavi or slums of, you know, Delhi and say that acha this is not available. Public services is available, इवन इन धारावी इट इज अवेलेबल, ठीक है, थोड़ा सा मारा मारी है, अवेलेबिलिटी थोड़ा सा शॉर्ट है, राइट, बट कंपेयर टू वेयर पीपल आर कमिंग फ्रॉम, राइट, this is definitely people, a lot of entrepreneurial people want to, you know, go through the struggle because they know that एक बार निकल गए तो हमेशा के लिए निकल गए, right? So this is about the access to better services and infrastructure. The third factor why large towns are so attractive as compared to small towns is the social and cultural factors, right? So, for example, urban lifestyle and aspiration, modern amenities, entertainment, cultural diversity, anonymity. खासकर कास्टिस्ट सोसाइटी सच एज इंडिया के अंदर एनोनिमिटी बहुत जरूरी है. मेरे को आइडिया ही नहीं है कि मेरे आजू बाजू वाले जो लोग हैं इन माई कॉलोनी, इन माई gated complex that I am a part of, I have zero idea about the caste of anybody or anybody this thing. ठीक है, मतलब ही नहीं है. मैं ट्रेन में जा रहा हूँ, थोड़ा ना कास्ट पूछता हुआ दरवाजे के अंदर भीड़ में खड़ा होऊंगा. आई एम सिटिंग इन अ रेस्टोरेंट हैविंग माई टपरी कॉफी और समथिंग लाइक दैट. आई एम नॉट बॉदर्ड अबाउट एनीबडीज कास्ट. यार मैं अपना काम करूँ, चाय पीऊँ, मतलब सैंडविच खाऊं या मतलब टाइम पास करूँ, ठीक है. सो नंबर वन, अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ सोशल नेटवर्क इन सिटीज इज ऑलवेज हेल्पफुल, राइट, बिकॉज सिटीज के अंदर, लार्जर टाउन्स के अंदर ऑलरेडी एक सोशल नेटवर्क आपका आया हुआ होगा फ्रॉम योर रूरल एरिया. स्मॉल टाउन के अंदर कम आया हुआ रहेगा, लार्ज टाउन में बड़ा सोशल नेटवर्क है तो वहां पर आप पहुंच सकते हो. एंड अर्बन लाइफस्टाइल एंड एस्पिरेशंस भी एक अच्छा अट्रैक्शन पॉइंट हो सकता है. सिमिलरली एग्जैक्टली इन्हीं फैक्टर्स का ऑपोजिट इज द पुश फैक्टर काफी हद तक इन स्मॉलर टाउन्स, राइट, दैट इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटीज आर देयर बट इट इज नॉट सो स्ट्रॉन्ग. सो मेनी अ टाइम्स व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट from rural areas to urban areas, these small towns become a stepping stone. So they are staging areas, right? You don't land directly from rural to urban, or or rural to mega city like Bombay. You can always stop over in a small town. You can work, but then you will see that opportunities are less, wages are less, unemployment, underemployment problem doesn't go away. Infrastructure and public services are there, but they are not as fascinating as you would find them in, let us say, in a larger town. ठीक है, disasters, environmental factors are a problem over there as well. ठीक है, and of course this question is not asking you what are the challenges faced by migrants in large cities, but I have mentioned some challenges which I want you to be aware of because you don't know what is the question that they may ask you next year. So overcrowding and strain on resources, ultimately you will have to suffer through some level of exploitation in terms of you'll have to compromise on your living conditions. Maybe you may have to compromise on your entry point into workforce. Maybe expenditure is there, right? So definitely some issues are also there. So the conclusion for this question is that large cities, they give you an escape, they give you a route, they give you a path to prosperity, which maybe not be available to you in smaller towns, maybe not be available to in rural areas, right? So small towns के अंदर कई बार you say face stagnation, you face environmental challenges, right? Whereas cities, they can give you jobs, they can give you education, they can give you health care, right? So things are changing, but that's what the major reality is so far. Of course, governments don't need to promote this kind of unsustainable migration. We have to target balanced regional development, and that would be supremely helpful for making sure that everybody is having a decent quality of life all across the countries. Okay. So this is one more question done. Now moving ahead to the next question. Okay. What is the phenomenon of cloudburst? You have to explain the phenomenon of cloudburst. Okay. Straightforward question. I would say that this is again a medium difficulty question. It's not damn easy because cloudburst as a phenomenon we don't study in so much details probably in our NCRTs at least, right? But it is not an impossibly difficult question to answer, right? Because it's not something that आपने सुना ही नहीं है कि क्या है भाई, right? So that is not the case. So cloudburst, it's a sudden intense rainfall event. So you witness a very heavy downpour over a localized area within a short period of time. That is what happens in cloudburst. ठीक है, कई बार mountainous regions के अंदर you will see this happening, that you will see rainfall exceeding 100 millimeter in less than 1 hour, right? This is the technical definition of cloudburst that you have to mention. Without fail, you must mention this. ठीक है, this is a diagram that you can try to draw. In geography, it will be helpful if you can draw some kind of diagram. Cyclone wale case में भी I wanted to give a diagram to you, but it was becoming complicated, right? So I did not give the diagram to you. But this is an important diagram which is easily drawable, right? कि मान लीजिए कि ये अरेबियन सी और ये वेस्टर्न घाट्स प्रकार का इलाका है, या फिर मान लीजिए कि ये आपके हिमालय है, right? So moisture bearing air is forced to rise, right? So air will rise. So what is happening is that there is a continuous flow of air and this air is forced to rise. There is a continuous flow of air and this air is forced to rise, right? So ऐसे ऐसे करके what is happening is that this air is getting forced to rise. There is a lot of condensation of water vapor that is taking place and the air is being, मतलब वो जो वाटर ड्रॉपलेट्स है, जो रेन है, उसको हम नीचे आने नहीं दे रहे, बिकॉज द फोर्स ऑफ एयर, जो राइजिंग एयर का जो फोर्स है वो काफी अच्छा है. अब जैसे ही इसके अंदर ब्रेक लगा तो अचानक से अब ये वाटर वेपर को ऊपर होल्ड करने वाला जो प्रेशर था नीचे से वो खत्म हो जाएगा एंड सडनली दिस वाटर वेपर विल कम डाउन इन द फॉर्म ऑफ एक्सट्रीमली हैवी एंड लोकलाइज्ड रेन. ठीक है, दैट इज व्हाट इज क्लाउड बर्स्ट. सो व्हाट इज क्लाउड बर्स्ट? सो प्लीज डोंट कॉल एक्सट्रीम रेनफॉल इवेंट एज क्लाउड बर्स्ट, बिकॉज क्लाउड बर्स्ट का एक डेफिनेशन है दैट द रेनफॉल शुड एक्सीड लेट अस से 100 mm per hour over a small area. So normal heavy rains, right, let's say that you are getting 50 mm rain spread over 5 hours, that is also heavy rain only. By any stretch of imagination that would be heavy rain, but you cannot call it cloud burst, right? क्लाउड बर्स्ट के फॉर्मेशन के अंदर यू सी द रोल ऑफ क्यूमुलोनिम्बस क्लाउड्स, टावर्स एंड टावर्स ऑफ क्लाउड्स जो है फॉर्म हो जाते हैं, राइट? एंड यू सी वेरी कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड एंड वेरी हैवी रेनफॉल. And because of that concentrated and because of that heavy rainfall, the end result is, the secondary effect is that you will see a lot of water accumulation, you will see a lot of flooding, you will see a lot of landslides. ठीक है, it is always very helpful if you can give some examples, it shows that you are aware. So किश्तवाड़ के अंदर, जम्मू कश्मीर के अंदर जुलाई 2021 के अंदर we saw flash floods, we saw widespread destruction, we saw a massive loss of life, massive, right? I have already explained to you that cloudburst is different from normal rainfall. Normal rainfall will happen over a longer period of time over a larger area. This is happening over a very short period of time, over a very short or a very localized area, and extremely heavy rainfall, right? So what is the difference between cloudburst and normal rainfall? It is the rate of rainfall, right? I have already explained, so there is no point repeating it. I have already explained the causes of cloudburst also to you. कि ओरोग्राफिक लिफ्टिंग होने लग रहा है, कि देर इज मॉइस्चर बेयरिंग एयर विच इज कमिंग इन कॉन्टैक्ट विद द माउंटेन एंड इज फोर्स टू राइज. ठीक है, सो दिस मॉइस्ट एयर व्हेन इट इज फोर्स टू राइज, राइट, इट cools down तो कंडेंसेशन टेक्स प्लेस, फॉर्मेशन ऑफ क्लाउड टेक्स प्लेस एंड अल्टीमेटली इंटेंस रेनफॉल होता है. बिकॉज जैसे ही ये जो यहाँ पर से एयर का जो ड्राफ्ट है ये कमजोर होएगा, तो ऊपर जो मॉइस्चर इकट्ठा हुआ है और फोर्सफुली मॉइस्चर ऊपर इकट्ठा हो गया, उसके पास एक ही रास्ता बचेगा, वो है नीचे आने का. सो दैट विल बी कमिंग डाउन इन द फॉर्म ऑफ दिस, राइट? सो मेनी अ टाइम्स इन अवर हिमालयन रीजन, इन उत्तराखंड, वी हैव सीन these kinds of events, right? Extremely devastating events, right? So when warm humid air, it rises rapidly because it has been pushed up by convection, so it rises, it cools, and then there is sudden condensation, heavy rainfall, right? So the idea over here is that many a times instability in the atmosphere, ठीक है? अब जैसे warm air at the surface, it is trapped by cold air above. वार्म एयर एट द सरफेस ट्रैप्ड बाय कोल्डर एयर अबो. नॉर्मली कैसा होता है कि जो कोल्डर एयर है वो नीचे सिंक कर जाएगा, वार्मर एयर ऊपर चला जाएगा, राइट? सो उसकी वजह से कैसा होता है कि if this air has been forced to rise upward, cold air has been forced to rise upward and condensation is accumulated, right? तो जैसे ही इन्वर्जन ब्रेक होएगा, राइट, जैसे ही इन्वर्जन ब्रेक होएगा, therefore you will see there will be intense rain. ठीक है, सो वेस्टर्न घाट्स के अंदर भी आपको ये चीज देखने को मिलती है, राइट? ऑफ कोर्स देयर इट इज आल्सो लिंक्ड विद क्लाइमेट चेंज, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली एवरीथिंग इज लिंक्ड विद क्लाइमेट चेंज. ऑल द इंटेंसिफिकेशन, सिवियरिटी एंड फ्रीक्वेंसी ऑफ सच इवेंट्स का प्रॉब्लम इज कहीं ना कहीं लिंक्ड विद क्लाइमेट चेंज. कंक्लूसिव एविडेंस इज नॉट देयर, बट इट इज कहीं ना कहीं लिंक्ड विद क्लाइमेट चेंज, ठीक है। सो क्लाइमेट चेंज जो है वो फ्रीक्वेंसी एज वेल एज इंटेंसिटी इंक्रीज कर रहा है। वार्मर एयर जो है, बिकॉज ऑफ क्लाइमेट चेंज ग्लोबल वार्मिंग इज टेकिंग प्लेस, वार्मर एयर कैन होल्ड मोर मॉइस्चर। इस मोर मॉइस्चर वाली एयर की ओरोग्राफिक लिफ्टिंग करवाएंगे, राइट। फिर फाइनली वो ओरोग्राफिक लिफ्टिंग बंद होगी तो एक्सट्रीम रेनफॉल इवेंट आएगा, राइट। सो ऑल इन ऑल यू कैन सी that frequency of cloudburst. So first of all, cloudburst ka detection is very difficult because it will happen over a localized area, right? So we will not be able to detect it many a times if it is happening in uninhabited areas के ऊपर हो रहा है तो हमें मालूम भी नहीं पड़ेगा, right? So first of all, cloudburst का prediction and recording is difficult. Nevertheless, the secondary effect of cloudburst is very devastating, which is flash floods. We have seen a number of examples of flash flooding. लेह लद्दाख के अंदर cloudburst हुआ था 2010 के अंदर, that destroyed a huge amount of property and a lot of lives were lost. It can cause landslide and erosion because of the deluge, the sudden rain that will fall. It will loosen the soil, cause a lot of landslides to take place. So if you are living in an area where the geographical structures are weak, so roads will get washed away, soil will get washed away, right? Vegetation will get washed away, right? Your small check dams and everything will get washed away because they are not very strong in the first place, right? So जो उत्तराखंड क्लाउड बर्स्ट हुआ था 2013 के अंदर, कैटास्ट्रोफिक फ्लडिंग टुक प्लेस इन केदारनाथ वैली, कैटास्ट्रोफिक। आपको शायद यू मस्ट हैव डेफिनेटली सीन दोज इमेज वेयर यू नो देयर इज द इमेज ऑफ शिवजी एंड उसके उनके आजू बाजू में जो है देयर इज huge amount of water that is happening. Urban flooding can take place अगर city के ऊपर cloud burst हो जाता है. Mumbai floods that happened in 2005, they were not cloud burst because like I mentioned to you that rainfall was staggered over a long period, right? So it was a period of very heavy rainfall. Popularly we like to call it cloud burst, but it was not cloud burst. It was something very close to cloud burst, but it was not cloud burst, right? Urban flooding can take place. There will be massive loss of property, massive loss of life, massive disruption to the economy, right? And we have to just be prepared, better prepared, right? Now the problem is that, like I mentioned to you, that scientists, they have the capability of telling कि कौन से एरिया में बारिश होने वाला है, but they do not have the capability to say कि कितना बारिश होने वाला है. So I can tell you where the rainfall is going to take place, but I cannot tell you how much of rainfall is going to take place. No scientist anywhere in the world have these kinds of capabilities. Okay? Very difficult to predict exactly, right? So weather forecasting technology, Doppler radar, satellite imagery, they do help us in predicting, but cloud bursts को predict करना is a very difficult because very localized formations take place very suddenly, right? And we do not have the necessary instrumentation in place, right? Even if we do have the instrumentation, we cannot predict cloudburst across variety of regions because आपको मालूम ही नहीं है कि मतलब it will require immense amount of instrumental installations. It's not practically possible, right? So not, it's very difficult. Disaster preparedness, we have to take care of best practices, right? रेन वाटर ड्रेनेज सिस्टम्स क्रिएट करना, फ्लड रेजिस्टेंस इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर क्रिएट करना, हिल साइड्स को वी हैव टू स्टेबलाइज सो दैट you don't see a complete breakdown of hillsides because of this deluge. That is what is something that you will have to do. Downstream preparedness has to be very strong. There is no point encroaching valleys. एक क्लाउड बर्स्ट का इवेंट विल कंप्लीटली डिस्ट्रॉय लास्ट 10, 15, 20 ईयर्स का प्रोग्रेस ऑफ यू, योर फैमिली, योर सोसाइटी, योर कम्युनिटी. एक झटके में वॉट एवर प्रॉस्पेरिटी यू हैड क्रिएटेड विल गेट वाइप्ड आउट. उसके अंदर कहीं ना कहीं प्रिपेयर्डनेस, एजुकेशन, अवेयरनेस एज वेल एज स्ट्रिक्ट एनफोर्समेंट ऑफ लॉज एंड रेगुलेशंस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. Strict regulation of land use planning is also very important. So proper land use construction practices, this is something which is very important, right? So unregulated construction को हमारे को जो है हटाना है, right? Destabilizing slopes, destabilized slopes को we'll have to stabilize, right? That's what we need to do. ठीक है. So शिमला के अंदर series of landslides were triggered by a cloudburst in 2021, right? Obviously we cannot allow this to happen, right? So what is the conclusion? Conclusion is fairly straightforward, that intense short-lived rainfall events, they can cause devastating flash floods, landslides, urban flooding, right? इफ यू आर इन अ वल्नरेबल माउंटेनियस रीजन देन बहुत भारी नुकसान हो सकता है अगर ये इवेंट हो जाता है तो, whether it is life or infrastructure, right? We have to try to forecast. It's not easy at all. It is better to be prepared for these kinds of disasters, right? And ultimately sustainable land use practices are required, right? These are required either which ways. अब आप क्लाउड बर्स्ट के लिए कर लीजिए या किसी और चीज के लिए कर लीजिए, आपको इसको करना तो पड़ेगा ही. So it's better you do it, right? Moving ahead to the next question. Next question is about demographic winter, right? And the question is that is the world moving towards demographic winter? We have to elaborate. This is a difficult by every stretch of imagination. बहुत मुश्किल है स्टूडेंट के लिए ये गेस करना कि जो डेमोग्राफिक विंटर है दैट इज अ कंसेप्ट विच इज लेट अस से डायरेक्ट ऑपोजिट ऑफ डेमोग्राफिक डिविडेंड, राइट? तो अगर आपका दिमाग चल गया तो बहुत अच्छी बात है एग्जाम के अंदर, बट अदरवाइज दिस इज अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ अ बाउंसर क्वेश्चन, ठीक है? आई एम रीजनेबली श्योर दैट no books in India or no popular notes in India would have talked about this. This is one of those questions जिसके अंदर you have to try to do the best that you can do. You cannot really complain much about it, right? So this is the question, right? I'll take a short water break and we will resume. You can push the video ahead by 1 minute, right? And that will be helpful. All right. So demographic winter. What is demographic winter? It's a straightforward concept that there is a significant decline in birth rate, there is a shrinking population, and simultaneously people are becoming elder and elder. So your birth rate has declined, your death rate has also declined, your longevity of life has increased, and when you combine all of these things together, that birth rate is below death rate, so the first outcome is a shrinking population and longevity has increased. People are living longer and longer. So the proportion of elderly in your population is increasing. So all in all, you will be able to see that the dependency ratio increases. What is dependency ratio? People who are elderly will not be able to work, right? Their percentage in the population is increasing, right? And that is something that the world needs to be ready about. Okay, so there are going to be social, economic and political implications of this particular trend that we need to be ready about, right? What are the potential implications? Implication is that you may see labor shortages. Implication is that you may see reduced economic productivity because people are getting older. Implication is that there will be greater pressure upon the government to provide pension, healthcare, and various other geriatric services at subsidized costs, right? And this is a problem which is emerging pretty strongly in a number of European and East Asian economies. Okay? They are the ones who are witnessing demographic winter. United Nations has been speaking about it since some time, right? I've already explained to you the declining fertility rate, because what is happening is that the culture of creating families is changing, the culture around parenthood is changing, right? So what is happening is that your birth rate or your fertility rates, they are falling below the replacement level. I hope that you know that 2.1 is the replacement level of fertility, that if every woman on an average in her productive year bears 2.1 children, so it's like hum do hamare do, right? That two parents will on an average reproduce and create two children who will replace them in the population going ahead, right? So that is your hum do hamare do kind of a concept. The moment your fertility rate drops below 2.1 to let us say 1.3 or 1.5, like it is in Italy and Spain, that means that parents are not even replacing themselves, that two parents produced on an average one child. So you can see that why population will decline. If everybody starts doing this, then population will start declining quite rapidly, right? So it's not as that everybody is starting to do this, but I'm just trying to explain to you the impact of declining fertility rate. Aging population, like I mentioned to you, we have vaccination, medicines, super medical care, right? So because of all of these things, we are able to take care of a lot of diseases which were earlier deadly diseases. So earlier ka deadly diseases are no longer deadly diseases now, right? So कुल मिला के बात ये है कि बिकॉज ऑफ ऑल दीज थिंग्स यू विल हैव अ ग्रेटर proportion ऑफ ओल्डर इंडिविजुअल्स लिविंग लॉन्गर, राइट? सो अब जैसे जापान के अंदर 28% ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन इज अबव द एज ऑफ 65, ठीक है? सो इट इज वन ऑफ द फास्टेस्ट एजिंग कंट्रीज इन द वर्ल्ड. देर इज अ लो पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ और अ डिक्लाइनिंग पॉपुलेशन, ठीक है? सो दैट्स द आइडिया ओवर हियर. सो यू हैव अ श्रिंकिंग पॉपुलेशन, ठीक है? सो जर्मनी इज फेसिंग अ डिक्लाइनिंग पॉपुलेशन बिकॉज ऑफ दिस लो फर्टिलिटी रेट. What are the causes of demographic winter? Why do you see this? Why is it that birth rates are falling like this? सबसे बड़ा कारण है सोशियो इकोनॉमिक चेंजेस. द कंसेप्ट ऑफ वुमनहुड, parenthood has changed. I'm not saying for good or for bad, right? But for greater urbanization, greater education, greater career prioritization, a lot of people don't want to create families anytime soon. सो कपल्स दे पोस्टपोन मैरिज, दे पोस्टपोन चाइल्ड बर्थ. अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल साउथ कोरिया के अंदर देर इज दिस मैसिव प्रेशर टू सक्सीड इन करियर एंड एजुकेशन. फर्टिलिटी रेट्स apparently have dropped below 1, right? Another aspect why is it that you want to have only one child is the high cost of living, particularly true in urban areas where housing, education, healthcare, nutrition, etc. is pretty expensive. So people who are having jobs, etc., or are having incomes, etc., they feel that we cannot really afford to have two or three children, so it's better to stick with one. Shifting cultural norms, right? So we are moving away from traditional family structures. Child-free lifestyles are okay and acceptable. They are no longer a taboo, right? पहले की मूवीज के अंदर नॉट हैविंग अ चाइल्ड यूज्ड टू बी पोर्ट्रेड एज समथिंग विच इज सो ट्रॉमेटिक, सो डिफिकल्ट एंड so this thing. But nowadays people are willingly and wantingly not willing to have children. A lot of people have replaced children with pets, right? Again, there is no harm in that. Again, there is nothing right or wrong about it. The idea in this context is that demographic winter is happening, right? Technological advancement is happening in contraception as well. So there is widespread availability of contraception, right? So as a result of which we are able to control, family planning in a very, very good way, right? And is the world moving towards a demographic winter? Definitely. By now you would have realized we have named a lot of countries. So even if you name a few countries, a few regions here and there, you will be able to impress the examiner with the fact that yes, you are aware of what is happening in your world, right? So if you look at the global fertility rates, so they are declining, right? So developed nations के अंदर, East Asia के अंदर, United Nations की studies are pointing out that the global fertility rate, it has either fallen to 2.0, it has fallen at the replacement level, it is going below the replacement level. So you don't need to know the rates, you just need to know the concept, you need to know where to apply this concept. You don't need to always be able to point out the exact number, which is what I told you in the earlier question also. That if you are trying to give examples, you just need to be strategic and smart. You don't need to know everything. You should just be able to be broadly right in the right direction, right? Apart from that, there are of course regional differences. There are areas across the world such as Africa and South Asia, where the population will continue to increase for a longish period of time, right? But there are other countries जहाँ पर population is going to decline. Even countries such as Nigeria and India will eventually see their population stabilize, right? I've already explained the impact of aging population, so I will not explain again. There are certain mitigating factors and strategies that the governments are trying to adopt now, but they don't seem to be working very positively. Like for example, child care subsidies, parental leaves, housing incentives are being provided. But once एक कल्चरल ट्रेंड या एक लाइफस्टाइल, यू नो, वंस इट स्टार्ट्स गेटिंग एंट्रेंच्ड, इट गेट्स एंट्रेंच्ड, ठीक है. सो दैट्स अ प्रॉब्लम दैट यू नीड टू बी माइंडफुल ऑफ, राइट. स्वीडन ने एक्सटेंसिव फैमिली फ्रेंडली पॉलिसीज इंप्लीमेंट करे हैं, पेरेंटल लीव्स प्रोवाइड करिए, चाइल्ड बेनिफिट्स प्रोवाइड करे हैं. We need to wait and watch and see whether this does result into a reversal of declining fertility rates or not. Consequence will be an economic slowdown because of shrinking workforce or maybe a reduction in economic productivity. This economic slowdown may also be because of low demand ultimately. I mean, मैं robots लगा के artificial intelligence automation लगाकर I will manage the productivity, right? I will manage that. But where will the demand come from? And you cannot say that you will export to India because India is wanting to export to you, right? So economic stagnation is something that they may see, right? It may not be such a big problem immediately because they are already at a pretty decent level of growth and development. So even if your economy is stagnating, it may not be so much of a negative problem immediately because human development numbers are good already, right? सोशल सिक्योरिटी एंड पेंशन के ऊपर प्रेशर आएगा ही आएगा, दैट इज 101% ट्रू, because of the growing elderly population, because of the dependency. So eventually governments may have to raise taxes to be able to provide these kinds of support systems, security and pension, etc. Migrants may flow in, right? Because see, ultimately workers will be required, right? So if there is, let us say, a shortage of labor in one region and an excess of labor in another region, you will see a transfer happening one way or the other, legally or illegally, wantingly or unwantingly, right? But that can again lead to social and political challenges. Integration becomes difficult, right? Those who are the native inhabitants of those lands, they may feel that their culture is something which is getting diluted, right? So Canada and Germany, they have turned to immigration so that they can address labor shortages, but at the same time there is a strong pushback from within these countries against this policy of immigration. So this is the broad concept of demographic winter, that declining birth rate is there, aging population is there, developed countries के अंदर, Europe and East Asia के अंदर, this is something that we are witnessing, right? And social implications and economic implications are going to be pretty severe, and we require policies. We need to support families, we need to do immigration reforms, and ultimately we need to strengthen our social security systems, because this is something which is now being put into motion. This cannot be easily reversed, right? So we need to do everything that we can to adapt and mitigate, right? Moving ahead to the next question. I would say that next question is also a medium difficulty question. It is challenging you by asking you three very interrelated or very close concepts, right? So gender equality, gender equity, and women empowerment, they are very close to each other kind of concepts, right? So this is so you see that this is the start of your society based questions, right? So in this they are going to ask you ki why is it important to take gender concerns into account while designing and implementing programs. That is the question that they are going to ask you. ठीक है? It's a very beautiful question. ठीक है? It's a very conceptual question. ठीक है? It's not very difficult by any stretch of imagination. ठीक है? So let us start talking about this, right? So these three concepts are three different ways of looking at, you know, the problem of gender disparities. ठीक है? Equality, equity, and empowerment. There are three different ways of attacking the problem of gender disparity. Okay, we need to have an understanding. So, what is the meaning of gender equality? Right. So, gender equality का मतलब है equal rights, opportunities, and responsibilities. We are eliminating discrimination. Whether it is access to education, employment, political participation, there is no discrimination. Everybody can study, everybody can work, everybody can vote, everybody can stand for elections. All offices are open to everybody, all opportunities are open for everybody, right? So this is your gender equality. You can give this kind of a statistics from Global Gender Gap Report 2023. The more such value added content that you provide in your answer, the better your answers are. Speaking about gender equity, right? So gender equity का मतलब है fairness, right? You have to accept that different individuals are having different needs, are having different starting points, and therefore they deserve different treatment. They deserve different treatment, right? So ये आपको मानना पड़ेगा. आप जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल ले लीजिए, जेंडर इक्विटी का मतलब ये है कि mothers they go through a entire episode or a period of elongated period of pregnancy and nursing children. So they need leaves, they need bigger leaves, larger leaves, longer leaves. Fathers, they don't need to produce the child themselves, they don't need to do bearing and rearing and caring of the child in the 9 month period and the subsequent period, but they need to be there, right? So they need a leave, but they need a shorter leave around the childbirth and after the childbirth to support the newborn and the mother, right? So फेयरनेस सेज कि दोनों को मिलना चाहिए, जिसकी जो जरूरत है उसके हिसाब से उसको मिलना चाहिए, डिफरेंट ट्रीटमेंट, राइट, गिवन द फैक्ट दैट बोथ आर हैविंग यूनिक सर्कमस्टांसेस, ठीक है. सो दैट इज अबाउट इक्विटी, ठीक है. Then there is empowerment, women's empowerment. What is empowerment? That you increase capacity of women to take decisions on their own, to participate in political, social and economic life. It is about giving access to resources. It is about boosting self confidence of women, right? अब जैसे empowerment इंडिया में कैसे हुआ कि we created self help groups for women. We provided support and training to self-help groups. Eventually we started providing credit to those self-help groups. Eventually those self-help groups started performing really well in terms of economic work and social work that they started doing, right? So why is it that you should incorporate gender concerns into program design and implementation? Because like we discussed in our society wala question, that society was inherently patriarchal in India, right? There was inherent male domination in India. Now, if you approach policy making, program design, and implementation through that male domination wala lens, then you will always keep women in a second class citizens wala situation, right? So, if you really want to address structural inequalities, if you want to remove these inequalities, right, then you need to start looking at the gender concerns, right? So women, they face higher barriers to education because of the cultural norms, for example. So there has to be a deep emphasis on beti bachao beti padhao. Why is it that Modi ji didn't start shouting from the rooftop beta bachao beta padhao, beta bachao beta padhao? जरूरत नहीं है बोलने की. जेंडर कंसर्न किसका है? मेल भी जेंडर है, फीमेल भी जेंडर है, ट्रांसजेंडर भी जेंडर है. प्रॉब्लम की कहां पर है सबसे ज्यादा, राइट? ट्रांसजेंडर और फीमेल्स के अंदर सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम की तरह नंबर टर्म्स के अंदर प्रॉब्लम दोनों बड़ी है, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम लड़कियों की सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है. तो इसलिए हमने बेटी बचाओ बेटी पढ़ाओ शोज जेंडर कंसर्न व्हेन इट कम्स टू एजुकेशन प्रोग्राम डिजाइन एंड इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, ठीक है. Why should you take gender into consideration? Because it will enhance growth and development. Report after report suggests that if you want to boost economic growth, increase women participation. If you want to boost productivity and innovation, improve विमेन्स पार्टिसिपेशन. मैकेंजी की ग्लोबल इंस्टीट्यूट की जो रिपोर्ट्स है वो भी यही चीज बताती है, राइट? इफ यू वांट टू, एक्सक्यूज मी, आई एम वेरी सॉरी. इफ यू वांट टू रिड्यूस पॉवर्टी, इफ यू वांट टू रिड्यूस इनइक्वालिटी, अगेन लुक एट इट थ्रू द जेंडर लेंस, राइट? अब जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल, women are very good at creating these self-help groups. They are having that consciousness, they are having that honesty, they are having that desire that together we can do something good for ourselves and our communities and our families. So giving them access to credit meant that they became productive, meant that their incomes increased, meant that their standards of living is improved. And ultimately, if you want to achieve your sustainable development goals, right, you have to have a gender concern incorporated into your program design and implementation. Inclusive development will be a pipe dream without gender concerns getting incorporated. Sustainable development will be a pipe dream without incorporation of gender concerns. As simple as that. If you want to improve social cohesion and reduce violence, you need to have, you need to address this gender based violence. You need to address domestic violence. You need to address violence against women, right? So this is something which is very important. A lot of initiatives were taken, like, and more needs to be taken given the kind of brutalities that were reported out of Kolkata recently and out of other cities earlier, right? Having these she teams and having the pink police, etc., is a very important aspect. What are challenges? So it is understood that yes, whether it is gender equality, whether it is gender equity, or whether it is woman empowerment, we need to have elements addressing these aspects. It goes without saying we need to have this, right? And we have also understood why we need to have. What are the challenges in incorporating gender concerns in program design? First is the cultural and social barrier, the patriarchal attitude of those who are in power, cultural norms of those who are in power, right? They are major barriers even today, right? Deeply entrenched है, खासकर साउथ एशियन कंट्रीज के अंदर एंड लॉट ऑफ अदर कंट्रीज के अंदर डीपली entrenched है. Unfortunately, if you want a gender-based program design and implementation, you need a lot of data, but we don't have that kind of data to start with. So either the data is unavailable or it is inadequate. So as a result of which many a times you end up shooting in the dark. Not that you are shooting anywhere in the dark, you know what the problem is, but having this data will be very helpful. For example, UN Women की report बताती है that only 13% of the countries they were producing gender disaggregated data. हमारे पास तो डेटा ही पैदा नहीं होता है, वो एक अलग प्रॉब्लम है, आप जानते हैं. जेंडर डिसएग्रीगेटेड डेटा तो बहुत दूर की बात है. सो दैट इज अनदर थिंग दैट वी नीड टू एड्रेस. एंड अल्टीमेटली लिमिटेड रिसोर्सेज एंड पॉलिटिकल विल, राइट? दिस इज योर अल्टीमेट बॉटल नेक. ऑफकोर्स जेंडर बजटिंग हम लोग इंडिया के अंदर करवा रहे हैं, बिकॉज ऑफ विच वी आर ट्राइंग टू एड्रेस द प्रॉब्लम ऑफ रिसोर्सेज, but a lot more needs to be done across the world, across the states, across India, right? So a lot more funding, a lot more commitment will be very very helpful in taking care of this problem. Okay, so what is the conclusion? By now I am hoping that you have appreciated the meaning of gender equality, gender equity, as well as women empowerment, right? And you will be able to highlight that if you want to achieve inclusive and sustainable development, if you want to achieve a reduction in gender disparities, if you want to make equal opportunities, fair opportunities available, then you need to have gender concerns incorporated, which will help you in reducing poverty, enhancing economic growth, promoting social cohesion, right? इसके बिना आपके goals achieve नहीं होंगे, right? And you will miss an opportunity for transformative change. I sincerely hope that you are appreciating the effort that is being put into creating this content and being put into delivering this content for you, right? I'm telling you very honestly from the bottom of my heart that one thing that I want to do before, I call it your retirement or before God has his or her way, I want to ensure that I make a positive impact in your lives. That is what I would really want to achieve more than anything else. And that is what is motivating me to create this kind of a content for you and wanting to work with you if you are wanting to work with us, right? Now let us deal with this question. Again, I would say it's a difficult question. This one is a difficult question. It's not an easy question. A lot of students will get flummoxed looking at this question. Not an easy question by any stretch of imagination, right? So intercaste marriages between castes which have socio-economic parity have increased, but this is less true of interreligious marriages. I will repeat the question again. Intercaste marriages between castes which have socio-economic parity have increased, यानी कि जो कास्ट अब एक दूसरे के नज़दीक आ चुकी है, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक पैरिटी, यानी कि दे आर क्लोज टू ईच अदर, दे रिलेट विथ ईच अदर, their economic position etc is quite similar. So intercaste marriages have increased between these castes, but that is less true of interreligious marriages, यानी कि interreligious marriages have not increased that much. That is what you need to discuss, right? It's a good question. It's a very good question. ठीक है. So intercaste marriages have definitely increased. Okay, now the moment there is socio-economic parity, moment castes come close to each other, so their lived realities become very similar, right? Their customs, cultures become similar, they are close to each other. But interreligious marriages के अंदर कैसा होता है that customs, cultures, practices, lifestyles बहुत अलग है, right? And that is what you need to try and highlight over here, that intercaste marriages के अंदर socio-economic status, right? The moment it becomes similar, the moment there is financial stability, so the social opposition reduces, right? So if you are coming from well-off background, right, educated etc etc, working etc etc, then you can transcend caste barriers because you have an autonomy to decide who your partner will be. So if you share educational and professional experiences, if you share the mental framework, if you share the common desired lifestyle, so this caste aspect can recede in the background. I will not say that it will necessarily and always recede in the background. This can recede in the background. Plus there is urbanization and modern education का impact. Again, I wouldn't say that modern education has been able to completely destroy this idea of caste based marriages, etc., right? So दैट्स द आइडिया यू नीड टू कीप इन माइंड. ठीक है. सो ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरी तरीके से हट चुका है, बट येस, मॉडर्न सेक्युलर एजुकेशन, anonymity of urbanization, social mixing, it makes intercaste marriages more probable because of the kind of exposure that you are getting, right? Cultural norms are changing. Like I mentioned, individualism, compatibility are more important than your caste affiliation. You come from my caste, but I make your life difficult, you make my life difficult. I can't gel with you, you can't gel with me. These are problems, real problems. Okay. But if we are having individualism, if we are having compatibility, then what's the harm? Plus, the government is also very much in favor of incentivizing, promoting, and nurturing these kinds of marriages, right? Like for example, Maharashtra government gives a cash incentive of 50,000 rupees for intercaste marriages. Nobody is saying that there are no challenges whatsoever to intercaste marriages. There are very much challenges to intercaste marriages, because I would say that somewhere this statistics must have come, right? That still only about, let's say that now this would have increased, so you can be very liberal and say that 10% marriages in India may be intercaste marriages. What about the remaining, right? So there are very much prejudices that are still alive and kicking, right? So there are caste prejudices, which is a significant barrier to intercaste marriages. Honor killing वगैरह करके डरा देते हैं, discourage कर देते हैं. Social ostracism, your not only will you be thrown out of the village, but probably your family will also be thrown out of the village, right? So these kinds of events and these kinds of incidents, they heavily discourage intercaste marriages, heavily, right? Families and social structures, they are still acting as gatekeepers. There is a strong opposition, there is a strong conservatism, there is a huge trend of patriarchy, which is basically deciding these outcomes, right? So that is still, these are still your challenges, and nowhere have we been able to completely overcome these challenges so far. Coming to interreligious marriages are even less frequent than intercaste marriages. Reason? Strong religious identities. Religious identities, they are more rigid than caste identities, in the sense that the boundary and the differentiation that is there across religions is more than across castes, right? So I'm not saying that one community or the other, and I'm not even saying that this is necessarily true or correct, right? But the perception is that interreligious marriages are seen as a threat to cultural and religious heritage, right? That these marriages, they face a huge amount of resistance because of this perceived threat, right? There are legal and social barriers, like for example, increased government scrutiny of interreligious marriages in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. So despite the fact that we are a country governed by the constitution that we are governed by, we have a Special Marriage Act of 1954 in place, but despite this, couples, they face harassment from their communities, and they don't necessarily get the support from law enforcement that they deserve. I'm not saying that necessarily you will get the support or not get the support, but the kind of political narrative around this topic that has emerged, it tells you that the legal and social barrier is quite a barrier that you have to overcome. Religious leaders themselves are discouraging these kinds of unions, may not to be doing it actively and openly, but aren't really coming out in support in a very big way either, right? What are the social implications for not being able to have interreligious marriages? So there is a communal silos. So communities are existing in silos. Communal tension, ghettoization is very much there. Social integration, somewhere or the other, is lacking. Social segregation is still something which is very much prevalent, right? So this survey found that less than 2.5% of marriages in India are interreligious marriages. Conclusion is that intercaste marriage फिर भी समझ में आता है, especially if you are coming from close to each other socio-economic groups. बट इंटर रिलीजियस मैरिजेस आज भी फेस करते हैं बहुत बड़ा रेजिस्टेंस. So despite the fact that legal framework is there, incentive is there, still intercaste marriages are struggling. And communal tension etc जो है, जो gap है religion के बीच में, that is something which is proving to be quite a difficult gulf to surmount. So definitely we want to promote an inclusive and egalitarian society, right? But yes, these are challenges which we need to overcome, right? So moving ahead to the next question. This is another 10 marker question based on society, right? So in dealing with socio-economic issues of development, what kind of collaboration between government, NGOs and private sector would be most productive? That is a question. Government, NGOs and private sector के बीच में क्या प्रकार का collaboration हमारे को करना चाहिए, right? So it's again a very beautiful question because it is asking you from a very conceptual viewpoint. So what is the role of the government? What is the strengths and weaknesses of the government? Similarly, role, strengths, weaknesses of NGOs, role, strengths, weaknesses of private sector, and how it can come together in a mutually supportive manner. Question is as simple as that, right? So you have to highlight the unique strengths and resources of all these three entities and prove that if they are effectively combined, and show rather that how they have already been effectively combined through examples and case studies, and then go on to conclude that yes, this can work, right? Now what is the role of the government? Policy formulation, regulation, creating the legal framework. For example, they created this national health mission, so they are allowing NGOs to implement community health programs, but they were the ones who created this entire policy, probably in consultation with the NGOs themselves. And the government decides how much resource to allocate towards which scheme, which program को कितना पैसा देना है. That is the government's primary job. What is non-governmental organization, NGO का primary job? Grassroots engagement. Like for example, establishing direct connections, creating tailored localized solutions for localized problems, responding in an agile manner to local problems. This is what NGOs can do best. Government will take time, but NGOs can act very quickly. For example, Goonj NGO in India. So they collect a lot of urban waste and they generate a lot of livelihood opportunities using this waste in rural areas, right? And NGOs, they are very good at, apart from grassroots engagement, they are very good at advocacy and awareness, right? So on the one hand, they can influence policy decisions by making the marginalized voices heard, but on the other hand, they can also create a lot of awareness, not only amongst policymakers, but also amongst the policy beneficiaries regarding the policies that have been made because of grassroots engagement. So this is what your NGOs can do best, that they can act as linkage between these two. Just hold on for 1 second. Sorry for the interruption. So the idea is that if you look at the role of NGOs, so NGOs in that sense can play a very positive role of being the link between the the policymakers and the masses. What is it that private sector brings to the table? Private sector brings innovation and investment. They have technological capabilities, they have financial capabilities, right? They can actually solve problems using a lot of R&D, research and development. Global best practices can be created by them. So as a part of their social responsibility, as a part of their contribution towards sustainable development, they can do this. Here you can mention the name of Tata Trusts, which is obviously in the aftermath of demise of Ratan Tata. It's a very important inclusion that you need to make in the essays, that Tata Trusts have played a phenomenal role in this regard, right? And a private sector can also help by creating employment generation. They can give opportunities to the vulnerable sections. They can give a lot of support to a lot of different sections of our population. They can provide internships. They can help in skill development. MSMEs can create the necessary jobs that India needs and so on, right? So once you have briefly identified the roles and strengths of each of these sectors, then you can start discussing the models of collaboration. You can speak about public-private partnership. You can speak about tri-sector collaboration. You can speak about CSR initiatives, right? अब जैसे PPP को leverage करके government and private sector comes together, right? So this is one kind of collaboration model, that public sector की funding and public sector का support combined with private sector का efficiency and private sector का implementation, यानी कि कुल मिला के you can have a win-win-win formula. You can give so many examples from PPP in the infrastructure domain, right? Similarly, you can have tri-sector collaboration. This is a global partnership for education which is operating at the world level, which involves governments, NGOs, private sector working together to enhance education outcomes, right? So when you have all these three sectors working together, there are enough number of examples from across the world, you can tackle some of the most complex socio-economic problems, right? Because you can pool resources, knowledge, network, right? Which you would otherwise government अकेले क्या क्या करेगा, private sector अकेले नहीं कर पाएगा, and NGOs अकेले नहीं कर पाएंगे. Similarly, you have CSR initiatives wherein what you can do is that you can, as a private sector, collaborate with NGOs and make their work more impactful. You can provide them the necessary resources, you can provide them the necessary support. Like for example, the Infosys Foundation, it partners with so many NGOs. So you can show the participation between government and private sector. You can show the participation between private sector and NGOs. You can also show the participation between government and NGOs. And finally, then you can show the participation between government, private sector and NGOs. तो ऐसे करके आप अलग अलग एग्जाम्पल्स दे दो, तो इतना ज़्यादा डिफिकल्ट नहीं है ये क्वेश्चन को टैकल करना गोइंग अहेड, राइट? स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड हो जाता है. Challenges to collaboration and how you can overcome them. Many a times you have divergent objectives. Private sector का objective is profit, politician का objective is popularity and votes, and NGO का objective is credit and outreach and engagement and membership, right? Not necessarily, right? You can always prove me wrong on all these 3 points, but divergent objectives, right? So if you have divergent objectives, then the collaboration can be hindered, राइट? अब जैसे क्या हुआ कि बीच में गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया दे स्टार्टेड टारगेटिंग अ लॉट ऑफ एनजीओस, सेइंग कि दे आर गेटिंग फॉरेन फंडिंग एंड दे आर हैविंग सम नेफेरियस इंटेंशंस एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. सो देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ हीटेड डिबेट अराउंड दिस एंटायर एस्पेक्ट ओवर हियर. So solution is that establish clear communication channels, have shared objectives. Resource mismanagement, right? If this is happening, misallocation or inefficient use of resource, wastage of resources happening, then that needs to be solved via transparency and accountability, right? Because ultimately project के goals meet नहीं होंगे तो partnership will break down. And ultimately there is also resistance to change. Organizations, they have their own bureaucracies, they have their own way of working, right? So having this culture of collaboration, capacity building, then can probably smoothen out the partnerships, right? Conclusion, I'm sure, is something that you understand by now, that these three sectors, they are your most important channels of solving socio-economic issues. They have strengths, and if we can bring them together and create partnerships, then we can have sustainable solutions to the most complex challenges. We already have a lot of examples, whether PPP, tri-sector or corporate social responsibility, and these collaborations will be very, very helpful. We need to overcome the problem of divergent objectives, resource mismanagement, institutional resistance, so that full potential of these partnerships can be achieved to to get the desired socio-economic outcomes which will help in the overall development of the society, right? This is the approach that you need to take for this question. Moving ahead, now here we start our 15 marker questions, right? You will see that the quality of discussion that I have done for 10 marker question, that will be the same quality of discussion I will do for 15 marker question, right? I may just increase my speed a little bit, right? But the content that I am providing, the description that I am providing, right, it's all basically the same, right? That's for your benefit, because tomorrow going ahead in this examination or some other examination, you may come across a similar question which will be a similar topic which will be for maybe a 15 marker instead of maybe being a 10 marker. That's something that is always possible, right? So moving ahead, right, so this is question that though the great Cholas are no more yet, their name is still remembered with great pride because of their highest achievements in the domain of art and architecture. So see, the idea of this paper is that they have asked you a question on Pallavas, they have asked you a question on Cholas. Naturally, next year they are not going to ask you a question directly on Cholas or Pallavas. Maybe, maybe not, right? So they may ask you a general question regarding South India, or they may ask you a question next year, maybe the contribution of Delhi Sultanate, or the contribution of the Mughals, or the contribution of some others, right? But it is important that you are prepared, irrespective, because some of you all may have history optional also, right? So the idea over here is that Chola dynasty flourished between 9th and 13th century, made significant contribution in various walks of life, especially in art, architecture, and culture. We saw in the earlier question, we mentioned the names of Mahendra Varman, Narsimha Varman. Similarly, over here, you must be able to mention the name of important contributors. You must mention Dravidian art, right? So when it comes to architectural achievements, so you have to mention about temple architecture, right? So temples were not just places of worship, but they were cultural hubs. A lot of activities and cultural performances and get-togethers must be happening in these temples. You must mention the Brihadeshwar temple at Thanjavur, which was built by Raja Chola I, right? It is obviously a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is a beautiful testimony to Chola's architectural prowess. 216 feet high Vimana was an engineering feat at that point of time, is still an engineering feat. Massive Shivlinga, right? Again, a massive, engineering feat at that point of time. Absolutely beautiful temple, absolutely stunning temple, राइट आज के दिन अगर ये बनाने को बोले राइट इतनी सुंदरता में राइट इतनी it will be a struggle even today, right? Structural innovations they did: towering gopurams, massive open spaces, massive complexes, right? So like I said, that temples are not just places of worship. We are not just here for worshipping. Temples are cultural hubs, and that involves structural innovations, right? Temples are awe-inspiring. They are basically emblems of the development and prosperity of your rule, right? Like for example, your Gangai Konda Chulapuram temple. So Gangai Konda, so when Rajendra Chola I had a victorious military campaign against his adversaries, so he created this Gangai Konda Cholapuram temple to kind of commemorate that. Larger than life-size sculptures, elevated vimanas, right? Showing the scale and space that they were able to achieve. जो टेम्पल का कैपस्टोन है, जो टॉप वाला पोर्शन है, दैट इटसेल्फ इज वेइंग 80 टन्स. 80 टन्स वाले सामान को इतना ऊंचा उठा के लेकर जाके इंस्टॉल करवाना मस्ट नॉट हैव बीन अ जोक. यू कैन सी the complex is so huge over here. You can see the size of the complex in the photograph itself, right? So you have these mandapas, you have these gopurams, right? So not only religious, cultural, but also economic activities, social and economic life is centering around these temples, right? So जैसे for example your Airavateshwara temple in Darasuram, right? Intricately carved pillars can be seen, sculptures can be seen, elaborate detailing can be seen, ornamentation can be seen, right? You can see the beauty over here. Again you will see that there is a hall. Again you will see that matlab, although the photograph is chota over here, but I'm sure that you are able to appreciate that walls are not plain walls. Massive sculpturing is there, right? This is one aspect of it. Okay. Then there is significant contribution to sculpture and bronze casting as well. So there is absolute mastery in stone sculpturing, right? So you will see carvings of Shiva, Parvati, Nataraja in various Chola temples. ठीक है, beautiful, lifelike, very fluid, very expressive. मजा आएगा देखकर ऐसा टाइप का, right? you will see realism and in their iconography, right? For example, this iconic Nataraja sculpture in the Brihadeshwara temple, कॉस्मिक डांस ऑफ लॉर्ड शिवा को हम लोग दिखा रहे हैं, मोस्ट रिवियर्ड इमेज ऑफ हिंदू आर्ट वर्ल्ड वाइड इसे माना जाता है, राइट? नटराजा, राइट? सो ब्यूटीफुल, लाइफ लाइक, आप देखेंगे सुंदरता, देखेंगे आप इसके अंदर, आप देखेंगे इसके अंदर जो मेजरमेंट्स हैं, जो लिम्स के जो प्रोपोर्शन है, एकदम मस्त है, राइट? एकदम एकदम लाइफ लाइक है। ब्रॉन्ज कास्टिंग के अंदर नेक्स्ट लेवल दोस्तों, next level, lost wax technique they mastered like anything, and even today from across the world we are still gathering all these beautiful castings, bronze castings that were plundered away from India, right? Absolutely remarkable, top class, right? Top class, ठीक है? So beauty and technical perfection unprecedented दोस्तों, unprecedented, celebrated across the world, right? सो द आइडिया इज दैट मेजर म्यूजियम्स वर्ल्ड वाइड के अंदर, चाहे मेट्रोपॉलिटन म्यूजियम ऑफ आर्ट इन न्यूयॉर्क या ब्रिटिश म्यूजियम लंदन के अंदर, आप देखेंगे कि दीज ब्रॉन्जेज आर एग्जिबिटेड, 1000 Chola bronzes they have been recovered, they are displayed in museums now, right? And influence of Chola art is spreading beyond their boundaries, definitely. Spread of Hinduism to Southeast Asia, spread of Tamil culture to Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Indonesia, thanks to the imperial Cholas, right? The impact on Cambodia, Angkor Wat ka naam we saw in Pallavas also, we are seeing in Cholas also, because it shows the level of connectivity that was there, right? Huge support to artisan communities, huge support to various aspects of society that were involved in this, right? So the name of Raja Chola and Rajendra Chola is something that generations and generations coming ahead will be taking, right? And जो आगे आने वाले पांड्या, विजयनगरा एम्पायर एक्सेट्रा के ऊपर भी उनका काफी पॉजिटिव इम्पैक्ट देखने को मिला। जैसे पल्लवास का इम्पैक्ट चोलास के ऊपर था, वैसे ही चोलास का इम्पैक्ट आगे आने वाले उनके ऊपर था, right? Chola heritage is being conserved with a lot of love and pride. UNESCO World Heritage Site है ये, like I have already mentioned, that the great living Chola temples, again this is a very prelims के लिए important point, you have to note down this point, right? That you have Brihadeshwara temple, Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple, as well as Airavateshwara temple, they have been declared UNESCO World Heritage Sites, right? So all of these points you must be able to appreciate, ठीक है? सम पॉइंट्स के अंदर कहीं ना कुछ मिस्टेक हो सकती है, आप चेक भी कर सकते हैं, राइट? ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है, आई एम ओपन टू लर्निंग फ्रॉम माई मिस्टेक्स, बट एवरीथिंग दैट आई एम प्रोवाइडिंग टू यू इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी हेल्पफुल गोइंग अहेड. Continued religious and cultural significance goes without saying, right? They are active places of worship, they are cultural centers, right? Rituals, festivals are still happening. अब जैसे for example in the Brihadeshwara temple we have this Kumbh Abhishekam or consecration ceremony. Thousands of devotees attend this event. Thousands of devotees even today attend the Kumbh Abhishekam event, right? It's as if कि कुछ चेंज ही नहीं हुआ है. आज से 1000 साल पहले भी यही हो रहा था और आज भी यही हो रहा है इन टेम्पल्स के आजू बाजू के अंदर. आप समझ सकते हैं कि the kind of contribution that they made, the cultural legacy that they have left behind, the monumental temples, intricate sculptures, masterful bronze casting, means जो उनकी फेम है, जो उनका नाम है, वो जिंदगी भर जो है मतलब वो हमेशा रहेगा, राइट? जो साउथ इंडियन आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर का जो इनोवेशंस है, जो ग्लोरी है, राइट, अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड इट इज रीचिंग, right? So temples, sculptures, bronzes, they are masterpieces of human creativity, and of course people remember these with great pride, goes without saying, right? Moving ahead to the next question. Now over here you will see a question from world history, right? Now you see two questions from world history, right? One question is dealing with world war, another question is dealing with industrial revolution. Going ahead, I am assuring you that you will be seeing a lot of option, a lot of assisted answer writing for world history also. You will see a lot of assisted answer writing for industrial revolution also, French revolution, American revolution, Russian revolution. We will be providing you a lot of assisted answer writing test series, chota chota, very chota chota test series we will be providing to you, so that you have an incentive that you study, come take a small test and evaluate yourself. Study, come take a small test and evaluate yourself. Something which is eminently doable, for because we want to reach out to you wherever you are. You don't need to go to any particular geography, or you don't need to spend in 5 digits or 6 digits to be able to study. You don't need to do that, right? That is what I want to achieve with this particular initiative, right? So how far is it correct to say that the First World War was fought essentially for the preservation of balance of power, right? Very beautiful question. Difficult question. You should have a decent understanding of what happened. So First World War was fought during this time period of 1914 to 1918. One of the most destructive conflicts, right? Now, was it the desire to maintain the balance of power? Or was it something else? That is what we need to answer, because desire to maintain the balance of power was one motivation. Was nationalism not a motivation? Was imperialism not a motivation? Was militarism not a motivation? Was alliance system not a factor? Because these factors also played into creating the ecosystem in which the World War One was triggered and fought, right? So we need to give a balanced answer over here. That is what the requirement of this question is, right? Now, balance of power is definitely one of the driving forces, right? So if you look at the pre-war European geopolitics, right? So in the early 20th century, some of the most industrialized nations were also some of the most militarized nations, were also some of the most powerful nations, and were also some of the most imperialistic nations, right? So industrialization, militarization, power, and imperialism, it was all going hand in hand. So Britain, France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia. So there was a delicate equilibrium between these nations, right? So there was this Congress of Vienna that was happening, that happened in 1815, and in that congress, you will see the creation of this system of balancing powers, that we don't want to entail into continental conflicts, because 1815 is important, because you are having this American War of Independence, you are having this French Revolution. So 1815 is an important Congress, because we don't want to have these kinds of, draining conflicts. That is what the idea over here is. But then Germany's rise and militarism is something that we did not foresee. Otto von Bismarck का नाम आपने सुना होगा, right? So Otto von Bismarck is for Germany, what Sardar Patel is for India. He was able to unite Germany and mold Germany into a military and industrial powerhouse, right? Germany adopted an assertive foreign policy like how China is adopting, because China became industrialized, China was able to create military, then they started becoming assertive. That is how it has happened in the past, that is how it is happening today. It's nothing new, right? So obviously there was fear that the Germans will start dominating the scene. So when this entire Congress of Vienna etc. happened, Germany was nowhere in the picture. Now suddenly 50 years down the line, Germany is threatening, right? 100 years down the line, Germany is becoming a major industrial producer, right? Now what happens over here is that you see formation of military alliances. So you have triple entente, that is Britain, France and Russia, and you have a triple alliance, that is Germany, Austria, Hungary and Italy. Now why are these alliances getting created? Because everybody is feeling threatened, so they want to be a part of a larger group, so that ki if one is attacked, the other one will help, the other person is attacked, the other one will help, right? That's the idea. अब जैसे Britain created an alliance with France in the Entente Cordial and its alliance with Russia in 1907, right? Because they wanted to prevent Germany from achieving European hegemony. तो अब Germany बैठ के अकेला देखेगा नहीं ना, right? Because Germany wants to disrupt the balance of power. But somebody, so old powers want to maintain the balance of power, new power wants to disrupt the balance of power, right? Plus there is also a naval arms race that is going on. There is a competition between Britain and Germany that is going on, right? So the idea over here is that there are other factors as well. There is nationalism and ethnic tension, right? अब जैसे बाल्कन्स के अंदर आपने पढ़ा होगा, right, that there is a lot of this thing, ethnic tension, right? So Austria Hungary Empire के अंदर there are multiple ethnicities and there is a lot of tension and conflict between those ethnicities, ठीक है? So there is assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria takes place. That becomes the immediate trigger, right? अब क्या जरूरत है यार, ये आर्च ड्यूक मर गया तो सबको आपस में लड़ने की, तो वो अलायंस सिस्टम कहीं ना कहीं आ गया. So this ethnic conflict became the spark, and this alliance system, right, one alliance versus another alliance, this became fuel to the fire. So this was the spark and this is the fuel to the fire. Is it only about balance of power? It's not just about balance of power, ठीक है? There is pan-Slavism which Russia is stoking. There is pan-Germanism which Germany is stoking, right? Apart from that, there is imperial rivalry, there is economic competition. Everybody wants colonies. Everybody wants to be a colonial power so that they can extract resources of other regions and enrich themselves at the cost of others, right? Moroccan crisis already हो चुका है मोरक्को के अंदर, right, where Germany challenged France and they almost came to fight a war with each other. There is an economic competition ongoing. I've already explained to you rapid industrialization. I've already explained to you that how industrial output is increasing. There is militarism and arms race that is going on. Okay. So the idea over here is that this arms race fueled by industrialization, fueled by prosperity, right? That is creating a lot of tension. That is creating likelihood of conflict. Germany is creating a military strategy called Schleifen Plan. What is Schleifen Plan? That quickly on one front we'll defeat France and then we'll turn our attention and defeat Russia, so that we don't have to fight a war on two fronts. Military expenditure is on the rise, hugely on the rise, right? So was the war fought to preserve the balance of power? Yes, to a certain extent, definitely, right? But Germany's expansionist ambitions in Europe, right? It was challenging the balance of power rather than preserving it. Plus, there was a system of alliances, right? That you are locked into alliances with each other and you are fighting each other's war. That led to escalation rather than preservation, right? Had preservation of balance of power been important, two countries are fighting, you would have pulled them apart and have kind of divided the spoils and somehow maintained the balance of power. यहाँ पर तो हमने क्या करा कि we go all in because of this thing. So this July crisis, this assassination of the Archduke, right? So that kind of entangled a lot of other countries into what was otherwise going to be a regional conflict between Austria, Hungary and Serbia. Let Austria, Hungary and Serbia settle it, right? Why should other countries jump in? But other countries are jumping in because of the system of alliances. And ultimately, this balance of power theory is showing one side of the picture. There are other factors which we just discussed, which are driving the, which is the driving force behind this world war, right? So preservation of balance of power, that's one aspect. But there are a complex web of other factors which is also supporting the prolongation of this world war, right? That's the balanced approach. It shows a deep and broad understanding simultaneously of what is happening, and that is very helpful. That is what this question is trying to check, that whether you possess the deep and broad understanding that is expected out of you, right? Moving ahead, this is a straightforward question, that how far was the industrial revolution in England responsible for the decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India, right? That is your another question. Okay. Some questions I don't want to discuss in this video, right? I would advise that you try to write this question on your own, okay? Because if I discuss everything, it doesn't make sense, okay? So I'm going to leave this question. The detailed answer is there, detailed approach is there, but let's skip a couple of easy questions and see how you fare in those questions, okay? This is another easy question, but I will quickly discuss this question for you, okay? The groundwater potential of Gangetic Valley is on a serious decline. How may it affect the food security of India? This is the question that is getting asked. Groundwater potential of Gangetic Valley is on a serious decline. How will it impact the food security of India? Okay. So this is something that you have to explain. So first of all, you will accept that yes, Gangetic Valley is a crucial agricultural hub which is using groundwater irrigation in a very extractive manner, and coupled with the fact that population burden is there and climate change is there, so your droughts and dry weather spells are quite frequent now, right? So groundwater is only getting more heavily extracted, and once this groundwater irrigation is not available, then what will happen, because we are used to green revolution methods of production, so food security in the form of availability, accessibility and affordability may get challenged. So in the introduction also you have to show a linkage, and finally of course in the body you have to elaborate, and then conclusion ke andar again you have to show the linkage and bring it to an end, right? So first of all, you should try to establish the importance of groundwater for agriculture in Gangetic Valley, that there is definitely a reliance on groundwater for irrigation. So be it Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, groundwater irrigation is playing a crucial role, right? If you look at green revolution, right? So we are using this technique which is depending on high yielding varieties of seeds, which requires timely irrigation, right? You can throw this kind of statistic into the picture that India extracted nearly 230 billion cubic meters of groundwater, for out of which majority was for irrigation, and out of which majority was in the Indo-Gangetic region. So we have clearly established that yes, there is a reliance on groundwater for irrigation, right? Then there is groundwater which is enabling year-round cropping, right? We are doing multi-cropping. We are doing Kharif, we are doing Rabi, we are doing Zaid. So we are easily growing more than two crops. Now, growing more than two crops is very important for around the year availability of food, right? Or around the year availability of a variety of foods. So we cannot depend only on one cropping going ahead, right? So this is also very important in the sense that इसी की वजह से ground water भी deplete हो रहा है, and एक बार ground water deplete हो जाएगा, and when you will not be able to do year around cropping, then your food availability will be challenged, right? So if you are monsoon dependent going ahead, then that will become deeply problematic, ठीक है? So we have clearly established the importance of groundwater, ठीक है? A for irrigation, B for around the year cropping. Now, what is the reason for groundwater decline and what are its consequences? So reason is fairly straightforward, is over extraction. That because of private investment, because of creation of tube wells and bore wells, right? Because of lack of any other alternative, farmers realize that if they can create this kind of an irrigation infrastructure in their areas, then they will be able to benefit in a very big way, right? So exactly in these areas, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, etc., water tables are falling at a fairly rapid clip of 0.3 to 1 meter per year, right? So over extraction is happening, A, because of lack of education, lack of awareness, lack of alternatives, और simple carelessness in the sense that कि फोकट का मिला हुआ है, क्या फर्क पड़ रहा है. Farmers don't realize the negative impact today, but nowadays the education and awareness amongst farmers is also increasing quite rapidly. Just hold on for 1 second. Let me have some water. So over extraction is one of the reasons. Population pressure is another reason, right? So there is immense pressure on land and water resources. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar का fertility rate is way above your replacement level. In North India का in general, Gangetic Valley in general का जो fertility rate है, that is above the replacement level. That is a challenge, right? Climate change is a challenge, right? Delayed or insufficient monsoon, dry weather spells, erratic surface water availability, right? So World Bank is suggesting that climate change, it could reduce groundwater recharge by 10 to 20% by 2050. If you can cite these kinds of examples, that will be nice. If you can't, it's okay. At least try to write an above average answer, right? So what is the likely consequence on crop production? So reduce water availability for irrigation, reduced irrigation. So it will negatively affect the crop yield, right? You can expect a 10 to 15% drop in crop yields, right? Ultimately, you will have to shift towards less water intensive crops, right? Which can threaten food security. I mean, it may be good for the environment, but it can threaten food security. Not necessarily, but it can, right? Food availability can come down because of a decline in production, decline in productivity. Food accessibility and food availability can become a challenge going ahead, because if the availability is threatened, then the next step is that accessibility and affordability can be threatened. And the effect on food security is that you will become vulnerable to droughts and climate shocks even more, because once you have depleted the groundwater and then you have a dry spell, or you have, let us say, back-to-back droughts, then what will you do? Then no amount of buffer stocks will help you beyond a point, and prices will increase, and it will hurt the poorest section of the population the most, right? So we need to preserve groundwater so that the impact of drought and water stress can be reduced, so that the risk of crop failure can be reduced, so that food security can be contained, food security can be maintained, right? So that's what the idea over here is. Okay. In 2019, we saw that the monsoon was deficient, so farmers were forced to leave their lands fallow because they did not have any other option. Okay. Socioeconomic impact on farmers will also be quite debilitating. that the debt and distress will go up, right? And they will be forced to migrate into other occupations that will force urbanization. And automatically, if farmers are less keen or farming families are less keen to participate in farming because of these shocks, then that will also have a negative impact on your food security. So how do you mitigate? How do you take care of this situation? So the best thing is to promote water efficient agriculture, right? Promote drip irrigation, promote rainwater harvesting, which is exactly what Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana is trying to do through micro irrigation. We can try to promote sustainable agriculture, do crop rotation, do integrated pest management. We can do groundwater management and regulation, right? There is already a framework in place. We need to implement it properly. And ultimately, community needs to find a solution for themselves. So community-based water management can take us ahead in the right direction in a very big way, right? So the idea over here is that declining groundwater potential, that's a serious threat, and eventually it is going to hurt food security of India, whether it is productivity, whether it is availability, whether it is affordability, whether it is accessibility, or whether it is prices, right? So आज नहीं तो कल ग्राउंड वाटर खत्म होगा, then crop failures, reduced yields, and distress will become a problem. We need to have a multifaceted approach to solving this problem. We need to have water efficient farming. We need to strengthen groundwater regulations and actually implement them. We need to encourage sustainable agricultural practices. We need to conserve and manage groundwater resources, and we need to ensure food security. That is what we need to do. If we are able to do this, then that would be really helpful, right? Moving ahead to the next question. Okay. Next question is a very good question. I would say again that it's a slightly difficult question, right? Because you don't generally, study these phenomenons so well, right? Aurora australis and Aurora borealis, right? You have some idea, but whether you have an idea that you will be able to write 250 words on it, that is slightly questionable, right? So you have Aurora australis, which is called southern lights, and you have Aurora borealis, which is northern lights. So these are natural phenomena that you are able to witness in the dark sky along polar latitudes. So high latitude regions के अंदर around the poles, you are able to see this. So what's happening is that charged particles, electrons, protons from the sun, they are coming through solar winds. They are being transported to the Earth's atmosphere. They interact with the Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere. And because of their interaction, because these electrons and protons, they are coming and interacting with the Earth's magnetic field, right? You see the occurrence of these Aurora borealis and Aurora australis, right? This is a kind of an easy diagram that you have to try and reproduce, right? Wherever possible, do make infographics. Wherever possible, do make diagrams. That is extremely crucial, right? So what are Aurora australis and what are Aurora borealis, right? So Aurora borealis or northern lights, right? So we observe them in northern hemisphere. We observe them in Alaska, Canada, Norway as well as Iceland के अंदर हमारे को ये देखने को मिलता है, right? Typically we see green, pink, red, yellow, violet, blue colors, right? Typically we see them around Arctic Circle. We see them in the winter months. We see them when the nights are longer. जो auroral zone है, again this can be something which can be very helpful for prelims going ahead. जो auroral zone है, that is your 65 to 75 degrees north का जो latitude है, that is your auroral zone. ठीक है. Similarly अगर मैं Aurora australis की बात करूं, राइट, सो ऑरोरा ऑस्ट्रेलिस जो है वो आपको एंटार्क्टिका, सदर्न न्यूजीलैंड, पार्ट्स ऑफ ऑस्ट्रेलिया के थ्रू देखने को मिलता है, राइट. दिस इज मोस्ट विजिबल अराउंड द एंटार्क्टिक सर्कल वाला रीजन, राइट, and very much similar to Aurora borealis in terms of timing, intensity and appearance, because the phenomenon is the same, right? So how are these auroras triggered? Like I explained to you that solar wind के अंदर charged particles आते हैं और वो charged particles come and interact. So this solar wind is nothing but a continuous flow of charged particles, electrons and protons. Now these particles are traveling at this 400 to 800 kilometers per second का speed, and the intensity or the number of electrons protons increase at times of solar flares or during coronal mass ejections, which are basically phenomenons on the surface of the sun. ठीक है, तो उस दौरान जो सोलार विंड की इंटेंसिटी वो इंक्रीज हो जाती है, and these auroras they become even more vivid, even more strong. ठीक है, So interaction with the earth's magnetic field is absolutely next level के ऊपर, ठीक है. So the idea over here is that they get deflected by earth's magnetosphere. They get deflected towards, so these charged particles, मैं charged particles की बात कर रहा हूँ, that as these charged particles they reach earth, so they get deflected by the earth's magnetosphere. So जहाँ पर भी इनको एक weakness मिलती है वहाँ पर से ये earth के atmosphere के अंदर enter होते हैं. They interact with oxygen and nitrogen in the earth's atmosphere, right? And that's how the colors are getting produced, ठीक है. So what is happening is that these solar wind particles when they collide with atoms, so these atoms के अंदर का जो इलेक्ट्रॉन है दो, they jump up into an excited state, and when they jump down they release the energy which is in the form of light, right? So ये energy atoms के अंदर के electrons को मिलती है, they jump up and then they release that energy, they come back to their normal state, right? And that energy which is released in the form of photons, and that is the color that you see. So your oxygen atoms का excitement and de-excitement leads to green and red light. Nitrogen atoms का excitement and de-excitement leads to blue and purple light. Again, very important from prelims point of view, right? So as I explained to you that these geomagnetic storms की intensity अगर बढ़ती है, intense solar activity होती है, then you will be able to see these auroras very brightly, very vividly in even lower latitudes, not necessarily only around the poles, right? So these auroras have been seen from Texas, they have been seen from Spain. What are the factors which are affecting auroras? So solar cycle है, because like I explained to you that the coronal mass ejection और your solar winds का जो troughs and crests है, so you will see periods of intense activity. So during these periods of intense activity, so it's a 11-year cycle, solar cycle. So whenever you see the solar maxima, so solar maxima के दौरान solar winds are very strong and auroras are very frequent and very intense, right? Apart from that, there is this technical concept of magnetic reconnection, right? Again, this is something which is a very prelims ready kind of a topic. What is magnetic reconnection? So it's a process that occurs when the Earth's magnetic field lines, they interact with those carried by solar wind. So magnetic field lines of Earth are interacting with the magnetic lines of solar wind, right? When इनके interaction की वजह से large amount of energy is getting released. This accelerates charged particles, enhancing the auroral display. ठीक है. Atmospheric conditions are also very important. Clear skies, dark skies are the best complements for auroras. Auroras का significance है, it does give us a deep understanding of our atmosphere, our magnetosphere. It gives us an understanding of the solar terrestrial interactions. It gives us an understanding of how solar activity is affecting Earth's atmosphere and magnetic environment, right? Of course, we need to be mindful, right? We need to monitor auroras, right? Because they are telling us what's happening outside immediately our atmosphere, because these solar winds, coronal mass ejections, they are very much capable of disrupting communication, disrupting the GPS system, and disrupting our power grids. So we need to be careful. And of course, these natural phenomenons, they have been happening for literally thousands of years, so they have a deep cultural and historical significance. So mystical and spiritual phenomenon is what we used to perceive them as till we started understanding them, right? So in the Norse mythology, auroras, they were thought to be reflections of the shields and armors of Valkyries, which are mythical female warriors, right? So the conclusion is that these are mesmerizing natural light displays caused because of the interaction of the solar wind with Earth's magnetic field, happening in the can be most easily observed or most expected to be observed in the high latitude regions, can be seen in the lower latitudes during geomagnetic storms, are natural spectacles, give scientific insights into space weather, into solar terrestrial dynamics, can captivate observers and contribute to our understandings, and also hold cultural significance, right? Moving ahead to the next question. Next question is also, I would say, a very good level of question. अच्छा question है, बहुत अच्छा question है दोस्तों. our objective going ahead is that ये सारे अच्छे questions की हम तैयारी आपको लिख लिख के करवाएं. I really want you to prepare for this exam by writing on a daily basis. Don't read, don't watch only, don't read only, don't print only, don't buy only, don't travel only, right? Write, practice, because practice is the most important ingredient of success. This is a platform which is dedicated to answer writing. I have created this platform with a lot of love for you guys. Do a lot of practice. What is a twister? Why are the majority of twisters observed in areas around Gulf of Mexico? Beautiful question. Good question. Right. So what is a twister, by the way? Right. So your twister is basically a tornado. Right. It's a violently rotating column of air extends from a thunderstorm to the ground. तो थंडरस्टॉर्म एटमॉस्फेयर में हो रहा है, ग्राउंड है, तो इस प्रकार का अगर आपको कुछ भी बनता हुआ दिखाई दे रहा है तो दूर भागो. Right, I didn't make it really well because this is supposed to be narrowing as you move, right? So इस प्रकार का rotating column of air अगर आपको बनता हुआ दिखाई दे रहा है तो that is your tornado. Of course, I have included a lot of graphics, don't worry, right? So why is it that you see it in and around Gulf of Mexico wala area? So there is a combination of meteorological factors. Again, this can be asked in prelims in any of the years going ahead. Very important to understand the formation of tornadoes, right? So what is not shown over here, what I would like to tell you is that winds are traveling in different directions. So lower atmosphere के अंदर maybe wind is traveling in this direction, upper atmosphere के अंदर maybe wind is traveling in this direction, lower atmosphere के अंदर wind is in this direction. So typically what is happening is that, twister or tornado, it is a rapidly rotating column of air, right? This is a rapidly rotating column of air you can see over here. This is the rapidly rotating column of air beneath a cumulonimbus cloud. ठीक है, beneath a cumulonimbus cloud, mostly under a cumulonimbus cloud. ठीक है. Now tornadoes, they are basically moving at a speed which can be 65 kilometers per hour, which will be mildly threatening, to 400 kilometers per hour, which will be deeply devastating, right? Now how is it that these tornadoes are developing, right? तो इसमें there is this concept of supercells, which is rotating storm systems. How did this rotating storm system get created, right? So there is intense updraft of moist air and there is an intense downburst, right? Now, like I mentioned to you, that wind at different altitude is blowing in different direction. So Gulf of Mexico से air ऊपर जा रही है towards north, कनाडा से रॉकीज सॉरी कनाडा से जो है एयर नीचे आने लग रही है, राइट? सो दैट्स व्हाट्स हैपनिंग ओवर हियर. जस्ट होल्ड ऑन फॉर 1 second, राइट? Right, after speaking for such a long time, I just want to see that I want to take you in the right direction. So yeah, so air is going from warm moist air is going northwards, cold dry air is coming southwards, right? And these systems are interacting. This is your front, cold front formation, and that is what is causing it. That is what is causing this thing. So this is wind shear. You have winds traveling in different directions. Two different air masses are coming and interacting with each other, and where they start interacting, there can be a deep disturbance, right? So this wind shear, it causes this horizontal spinning effect, right? So the idea is that the shape is funnel shaped phenomenon, right? And this funnel consists of condensed water, vapor, dust and debris. It causes localized destruction. It causes destruction along a very narrow path. तो जहाँ पर भी वो funnel is touching the ground, there you will see a destruction. It's a short-lived but an intense phenomenon. It may last only a few minutes, but it can be deeply devastating. So like I explained to you, that is the unique geography and the climate that you need to speak about. So this Gulf of Mexico and Aju-Baju wala area, it is called the Tornado Alley, right? It's called the Tornado Alley. So this is your Tornado Alley. So in 1950 to 84, this was the Tornado Alley. In this time frame, this is the Tornado Alley. So you can see that it is dynamic. It is something which is fluctuating, right? So Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Mississippi, Alabama, as well as Louisiana, these are your mostly affected areas. So like I tried to explain to you, right, that warm moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, right? So this warm moist air, this is going northwards into southern United States. यहाँ से यहाँ वो air जा रही है, right? And this is a very important ingredient. This will create your thunderstorms, और वो thunderstorms आगे चल के tornado बनेगा, right? This is interacting with the cold dry mass of air moving southwards from Canada, right? और ये temperature contrast है, ठीक है? So these are two very distinct air masses. So cold front and dry lines, ठीक है? So the interaction is between this warm moist air from the Gulf and cold dry air from Rockies or Canada. I was correct, right? And this cold front, right, this is providing the necessary instability, right? Plus साथ साथ में अगर jet streams है, so the jet stream, I'm sure you know the definition of jet stream already, but jet stream is fast flowing river of air in the atmosphere, right? So jet streams जो है, they move over areas where cold and warm air masses collide. तो अगर ये जेट स्ट्रीम्स भी पास हो रहे हैं उस एरिया से, सो देन दे विल इंटेंसिफाई द स्टॉर्म सिस्टम, जो उसका जो रोटेटिंग वाला इफेक्ट है दैट विल गेट इंटेंसिफाइड फर्दर, राइट? सो दैट्स अनदर प्रॉब्लम, ठीक है? सुपर सेल्स आई हैव ऑलरेडी एक्सप्लेन टू यू, so I'll not repeat this over here. So there are these two words that you need to be aware of from, let's say, a prelims point of view next year, which is Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley. So what is Tornado Alley, right? This is again an image that will be helpful. So this is your Tornado Alley, this is your Dixie Alley, right? So Tornado Alley, it consists of Texas, Oklahoma and Kansas, right? And Dixie Alley, it's consisting of Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, right? So यहाँ के जो tornadoes है, they are supposed to be more dangerous because heavily forested and populated areas के ऊपर उसका impact आपको देखने को मिलता है, right? And these are the ones which are most frequent tornado alley के अंदर. Dixie alley वाले most dangerous है, ठीक है? So frequent इसलिए है because of the steady supply of warm moist air to fuel the severe storms. That's what you need to understand. Secondary impact, I'm sure you will understand that destruction of property, destruction of infrastructure, loss of life, loss of livelihood. Economic impact, how can you mitigate and be prepared? Have advanced warning systems, radar systems, satellite imaging, which they already have, and community awareness and preparation, that if tornado say related alarm signals are sounding, then you need to go to your basements, go into areas of safety and shelter, because it will have the impact it will have. You cannot escape the property damage, but you can at least minimize the impact to life. That is what you can at least try to do, right? So your tornadoes or twisters, like I explained, powerful destructive natural phenomenon triggered by interaction of warm moist air from Gulf of Mexico with cold air masses from the north. This is because of the unique geography, right? Supercell thunderstorms create होते हैं, jet streams उसको और violent बना देता है. We have explained Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley, which are the hotspots for tornado formation, which can cause significant destruction, which can be avoided if you have an early warning system and community preparedness to save the human life and property, right? So this is the idea over here. Moving ahead to the next question. What is regional disparity and how does it differ from diversity, right? How serious is the issue of regional disparity in India? So diversity तो विभिन्नता होती है, disparity जो है that's a separate topic, right? So disparity means uneven distribution of resources, wealth and developmental opportunities, ठीक है? And diversity is reflected in language, ethnicity, culture, ठीक है? So regional disparity is that some regions are ahead of others. There is economic disparity in terms of industrialization, infrastructure, access to resources. Why is it that you have regional disparity? Historical reasons, right? Britishers created Bombay, Madras and Kolkata as important centers of industrialization, important trading centers. Geographical factors are there, resource proximity is there, policy imbalance is there, favoritism is there within policy. Difference क्या है disparity and diversity के अंदर? Regional disparity is negative, it is harmful, it is dangerous, right? Regional diversity is enriching, is reflective of the pluralism that is in India. Like I explained to you, that diversity can be seen as a source of strength, as a source of richness. Disparity by default will lead to unrest, by default will lead to migration and problems. Regional diversity can promote unity, regional disparity can tear the country apart. Seriousness of regional disparity in India, the economic impact is visible in the unequal growth, is visible in the urban rural divide. What are the social and political consequences? Migration is a problem. Regionalism and religious political tension is a problem. Social unrest is a problem. We have to address regional disparity. Special category states are provided. Scheme for backward areas are provided. Smart cities and industrial corridors are being created. I hope that you are able to understand this topic, right? Moving ahead to the next question. Despite comprehensive policies for equity and social justice, underprivileged sections are not yet getting the full benefits of affirmative action envisaged by the Constitution, right? So you have to definitely talk about SCs, STs, and OBCs. You have to talk about the fact that comprehensive provisions are there. Article 15, 16, 46, reservation system is there. So Constitution has done its job. Special welfare schemes are there, whether it is education, economic support, or social welfare. Despite this, because of inefficient implementation, corruption and leakages, lack of accountability, education barriers in the form of poor quality of education, high dropout rates, social discrimination and exclusion in the form of caste-based discrimination, limited access to resources, gender-based inequities within these communities, right, intersectionality and limited representation की वजह से ultimately you see that there is still exclusion, there is still a divide which we need to overcome. How? Right? We need to overcome by strengthening the implementation and mechanisms by having a holistic approach, right? There is another question on globalization. Let's take it as a challenge. If you have convinced yourself that yes, you will be going through this document and you will be attempting, I invite you to participate, right? So I'll be bringing this session to an end. I can assure you that this document is complete. I want you to attempt this document on your own. I want you to take this test on your own. This is the start of your answer writing practice with CivilsWrite, and I will take you to the absolutely next level of preparation, provided that you are willing to put in the effort that is expected out of you. With this, we'll bring this session to an end. You will see more such sessions. Thank you so much. All the best and Jai Hind to all of you.